like we have 2 more joining us too, so. All right, we are live streaming and recording. Go ahead.
Great. So just like we do with every special meeting, why don't we get up and do the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll get this meeting started. So Kim, I think you've got the flag in the background there. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. So excited to get this thing going. For those who are just joining, you know, I am trying to keep a very timely meeting. If we don't have to go to 2 o'clock today, I think if we can work our way through the subjects, I'm all fine with finishing ahead of time. If that takes us to lunch and expand a little bit, that's great. But I think we're going to be able to work our way through. With Brett not being here, there might be a couple things we like the agenda for the next meeting. Sounds like we've got a couple venue ideas from Kelly. But I would say let's just jump right in and go to our first topic, which is going to be strategic planning by Anya.
All right, good morning. Kelly, did you give me permission?
I am doing that right now.
Okay.
Okay, you should be good.
You'll see my screen pop up in just a second. We're going to go over the long-awaited staffing plan that you all requested during the retreat in February. You have all the materials in front of you. We're going to go through a couple different packets throughout the presentation, and each department head is going to be able to speak about their department needs. But at first, I'm going to go over the PowerPoint a little bit and just go over some general information about the staffing plan. And feel free to interrupt me if you guys have any questions throughout. So just a little bit of background. Like I said, at the retreat, we discussed a staffing plan. Council asked, you know, with our growth of the city and anticipated continued growth, what are the needs? What are we not getting done that we need to? And what are we not getting done that we want to? And so that's kind of the approach we took for beginning this, routing this staffing plan. And here are the 6 steps that we took in general to formulate this plan. We evaluated our goals. We looked at influencers, analyzed what we currently have as a staffing model, envisioning needs and gap analysis, and then we have developed a solution plan. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of the steps so you kind of know the steps we took. When evaluating the goals, we looked at the mission and the vision and our values and considered how these positions are going to help for our overall mission and vision of the city. So how does it all connect? You know, why is this job important to completing the mission? Some of the outside influencers we had, and the reason why this staffing plan was delayed so long was because of COVID-19. At the time, in February, March, it didn't make sense for us to come with a staffing plan when COVID was so uncertain. Unemployment rates were at an all-time low before COVID hit. And now they're at an all-time high. Right now we're sitting at 7.8%, but they peaked to 16.3 in April. And how that relates to the staffing plan is right now we have an opportune time to recruit top performance and top talent because unemployment rates are high. People are looking for jobs, and that means there's more talent pool for us to dig into. We also considered, you know, city revenues with COVID-19 and other COVID-19 impacts, and how that's going to change the workplace. I mean, teleworking, the cleanliness in the workplace, there's a lot of different factors and even different duties now that staff are being asked to do that COVID, without COVID, we would have never thought of or never done. Sorry, Troy, what was that? Oh, okay. I think he just wasn't on mute.
Yeah, I think somebody wasn't muted.
Okay, and then the next step was just, we looked at the current state of our structure, we looked at our current org charts. This is just the number of existing staff and FTEs we currently have in each department and the vacant positions that we have. And What I will say about the vacant positions, most of them were held due to COVID. We are starting to recruit for public works folks right now. 3 of those vacancies you see are actually ones that we're eliminating, but I wanted to show you kind of the picture of 2020 as a whole, and then we'll move on to the strategic plan and show you what we've kind of already done in public works and what you've already approved in the last month. So this is kind of the overall picture right now of, you know, pre-August. And what we're doing currently, we do have 4 seasonals that are now vacant. The seasonals just ended their season last week. So right now we're sitting at about 100 staff, 100.6. We have a couple of part-time folks that work for the city. So that's 0.6. If you see the points, that's why, because there's some half-timers. So when we went to step 4, we envisioned the needs. And what this entailed was each department head and we all sat down and we went over these questions. So, you know, what is it that you need to get done? What are you not getting accomplished that you want to get done? And then, like I said, we looked at how does that plan align with the city's mission and vision. Other things we discussed were updating job descriptions. Are they current? Do we need to update them? Are we effectively using the positions that we currently have? I think that's the first thing you need to do. And then think about in the future, what do you know about your staff and your department that could change? You know, anticipated, you may know that someone's planning on retiring, or, you know, thinking about growth and development opportunities for your staff, talking about benchmarking and span of control of supervisors. As we add staff, we need to make sure that we build in those layers and opportunities for our internal staff, as well as the supervision piece, and make sure that the supervisors aren't overwhelmed now with these huge teams that they can't, you know, properly supervise and guide. So the next step was a gap analysis. Different departments have different methods of doing this. Some created daily tracking tasks. I know Public Works does that. And then the police, I submitted the police allocation model for your guys' overview. We won't be able to go into that in depth because of time constraints, but I'm hoping you guys will to read that. I know the chief and his staff put a lot of work into the police allocation model, and they do so every year, I believe. They talk to their staff. You know, the frontline staff know the work that needs to be done. They know what's not getting done. And so surveying the current staff and what are the needs, I mean, that's a really important step that some people use. And as a department head, they know their department best. So, you know, they know the workload, they know what's not getting done, what is getting done. So these are kind of the things that we looked at. And then we did have some department head meetings with Jean, and even the mayor was part of one, about what are what is prioritized. And, you know, now that we have a plan from the, you know, community development department, and we have a plan from Public Works, are there any overlapping kind of positions, and do they support each other's plan? So we kind of collaborated, we went over our plans together, we kind of presented to each other what our needs were, and there was some adjustments made because of that collaboration effort. So you'll see in the plan, you know, for example, the finance department needs an accounting person for more accounts payable, which we already have accounts payable with the deputy clerk half-time. And so the proposal with that is we're taking part of the deputy clerk and putting it into accounting, which affects now the city clerk's office. So, you know, we kind of had to work together, communicate really well on what the strategy was and where we're going to pull the resources. So this is the current city org chart, and I can zoom in a little bit so you can see kind of what's going on here. The key, oh, it doesn't like me doing that. So the key is at the bottom. The dark colors are the supervisors, and the filled positions all have names, kind of self-explanatory. The lighter color are the vacant positions currently, and it just shows the overall kind of structure. If you want me to scroll somewhere, let me know. It just kind of gives you an overall look with the whole city on one page and every single person included. And then we'll go to the next slide. This is the proposed. So everything is color coded by year. And then it still carries the same key as the previous one. So the supervisors and the current staff are all brought over to this. Each color code matches the color codes on the other worksheet I provided, which has all the salary calculations and which is by year. So try to make it easy for you guys to follow which position is which, since there is no permanent person. If you want me to zoom in more, I can. Just trying to find my scrolly bar. And we're going to go over each department by itself so you can kind of see. This is just an overall picture of what, you know, the previous and then the proposed looks like as a whole.
I have a quick
Trying to fit
question.
it all into, yeah.
Is this something that could be emailed out to us this morning so that we have a chance to review it during the retreat a little more in depth?
I believe Kelly sent it out yesterday.
Yeah, Angie, this was part of the packet I sent out yesterday.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, but I can resend, so just let me know.
No. I'm sure I have it. I'll let you know if I need it.
Thanks.
I know it's a lot to take in and a lot to look at.
Kelly, is there a way to, it's very hard to read on an 8.5 by 11.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to expand this some way so it is readable? I mean, it's great having all this color coded stuff, but I for one, I mean, the proposed organizational chart, I can't read half of what's on it.
Yeah,
'Cause it's so small.
I have it the org charts are formatted with 11 by 17 and we can print them for you in that size. So we can get those to you, but they are formatted that way. So I wasn't sure, you know, we kind of offered if people want us to print it for them, we can. So definitely we can get it bigger for you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Maybe. Uh-oh, now it's moving my slide. Okay, so we're gonna start with police, and I will just say before I let Chief take over is what we did here is we put the whole org chart and the cost as a snapshot all on one page for you. We did something similar when we proposed the public works org chart, and these numbers for the salary came from this spreadsheet. And so I'll quickly talk about this spreadsheet that was included in your packet. This is like I said, each year is color coded, each department, you've got your position title. And then what we did was if it was a position that we currently have that we're just adding an FTE to, we knew the salary range. So we plugged that in here in this 2020 salary range. We have another column assuming a COLA for everyone, which is at this point where the contracts, the guild is a 1.5 minimum and Teamsters is 1. So for non-reps, we assumed in the middle of those two, just for estimations at this point. So this will get us to kind of what we're looking at in 2021. And then your benefits, we're assuming 40%, which is pretty average or even maybe on the high end for some, just depends. But more conservative approach for the benefits. And then this next column is the cost of the original position with benefits. So if you see an asterisk by any position, that means it's a reclassification. And so the column G where it says cost of original position, that is what it's budgeted for or what the current incumbent is costing. And then this is the difference. So this is the total cost for the plan. So you will see if it was reclassified for a couple of these down here, there's no cost because it's going to say the same salary range. It's just a change in position title and maybe some duties. For positions that are brand new to the city, we did salary surveys, quick ones, and just to get some estimates, using our AWC salary survey to see what other cities are paying these similar positions. Some cities don't have similar positions, so we used our current salary schedule to determine where that salary would most likely be placed. If these positions are approved or, this plan's adopted, over time, what we would do is we'd do like an in-depth analysis, which it would be pretty close to these, I would assume. So we did do some research into those. And then what you'll see over here, I'm going to hide these ones real quick. On the next part of this spreadsheet is the percent distribution for each position per fund. So you know where the money is going to come from, which is really important when we're talking about, is it a permit? Is it a permit position? Because I believe we have permit money to fund positions, where maybe general fund may be a little bit more difficult. So this was how the positions would be allocated. And then the dollar correspondence with that percentage is in the next 4 columns. And then here's just some notes about maybe a little bit about what the positions are about, maybe just some general notes, updating. And then at the bottom, we've got totals. So total by fund, by dollar amount, and by year, you'll see the cost impact. And then on this side, actually I hid those ones, so let me unhide those. These are the totals for each of those columns above. So corresponding column, this is the 2020 salary range, here's the COLA, this is the benefit cost column, and then this is the original cost of the positions. And then this is the total cost. The other page you have is the citywide cost summary analysis. So this is just a summary of what is on that first page, but by department. So you'll see, for example, the cost of the executives department for 2020 is nothing. For 2021, the cost is 10,000. 2022, 55. So these are just the totals from the first page coming over to this. So you have a summary of each department, which corresponds then to your org chart on the total cost on the org chart. And then these are the totals. We have a subtotal per department, and then an annexations, and then a total with annexations down here. If annexations were to occur, there are some additional positions that each department would be requesting. And then same as the other page, here's the cost by fund here by year. And then down here is our funded FTE count. We have current, which you saw on one of those slides. And then as we move through the strategic plan, here is the addition of positions by year and the total. So at the end of the plan, you'll see 139.1 FTE. So it kind of gives you a summary on this page. The last page we included in your packet is something you saw at the retreat in February, which is the personnel comparison by city. So some of these, I think there's an asterisk on the bottom. We didn't have any data updated from 2019 to 20 for these 4 cities down here: Anacortes, Arlington, Linwood, and Mill Creek. So we just left the 2019 employee count on here, but we updated all the populations, updated ours, and then you'll see at the bottom what that means. And maybe it means nothing, maybe it does mean something. Each city has different services, different assessed values. So this is just averages and some information for us to look at. And if we were to take the average of all these cities by population, it would suggest that based on an average, we should be at 161 staff. Well, like I said, other services, other cities, it's really not apples to apples necessarily. This is just a quick comparison. Any questions on the spreadsheets before I pass it on to Chief?
What, Anya, I do have a question about this spreadsheet in particular. Is there any way where the numbers are disproportionate, where we see cities with similar numbers but much higher staff, they tend to, looking at the chart, tend to have more services outlined. And of course, our line is blank. Is there any way to estimate? I wasn't able to pull it out looking at the organizational chart throughout the plan this morning, what new services would be added by increasing our staffing, by closing the gap.
I know one service that will be added definitely is passport services. That was something a lot of cities aren't offering. I know that we're proposing some GIS infrastructure. I think each department can probably talk about the services that they'll be adding with the staffing better than I can. So I think maybe, hopefully your question can be answered throughout the presentation, and then we can talk about it at the end if that's okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, if there's nothing else, I will pass it over to Chief. And Chief, let me know if you want me to change the screen.
Okay, thanks so much. Actually, Kelly, is it possible that you allow me to share my screen?
Well, I suppose, Chief. Yes. Yeah, no, you should be able to. Give it a whirl and let me know.
Okay.
And I have your summary on this next slide, Chief, about each right here.
Okay, I'll I hope you all got a chance to look at the allocation model. This comes out of that, and I'm not obviously going to go through the whole thing. I'm just going to go over a couple of different pieces of it. So the biggest concern at the police department is going to be personnel, is going to be keeping up with the growth of the city and meeting our obligations. So there's a lot of different ways to look at how many police officers you need. Like Anya, one way to look at it is to use comparisons to other cities. So for example, this is the comp cities used by Lake Stevens. So you can see the number of officers per 1,000 population. So that's one way to look at it. And obviously, as our population increases, without adding the officers, that percentage goes down. So you can see right now we're at the lowest percentage for our comps, and we have the lowest percentage for all agencies in Snohomish County. But also,
hey, Chief.
Yes.
If you're sharing something, I'm not seeing it. I see the police proposed org chart still.
Boy, I have it up on my screen. Kelly, can you help me out here?
Sure, Anya, do you want to stop sharing? You may not be able to bump him. Okay, there we go.
Oh, yeah, there we go. I was in control.
It makes more sense to the narrative.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
We can see it now, Chief.
So as you can see, we have the lowest average for our comps and also the lowest average for Snohomish County, but also like Anya said, it's hard to compare because cities have different services. So that's not, maybe not the most accurate way to do it. There's a lot of different ways that you measure these things. And what Lake Stevens has typically used is what's called the authorized level approach. And basically it just follows budgeting. So you basically staff to what you can budget. So you can see there's kind of been an up and down over the years. Like for instance, there was a big jump in 2010 following an annexation. We went up to 1.5, but then over the years it's dropped back down again. And you can see for the last 3 years, we've maintained the exact same number of FTEs. There have been no new FTEs in the police department in the past 3 years. So that's a different way to look at it. But again, not 100% useful. So we tried to look at a workload-based approach. And again, I won't go into all the details of it, just to highlight how we came to it. And really to point out, as you can see the little drawing over on the side, the issue is we have to answer calls for service. And that's going to be our number one priority. And as those calls for service go up, obviously then all the other things that the city expects of us, the time that we have to do those decreases. So when we look at what will be able to add with staff or what can't we do without staff, that's what that will get into. So we looked at our calls for service. We, through our record system, we looked at, for instance, if we have 1,192 reports generating from calls for service, we can get a good idea of how long each one of those takes. So anyways, we look at the calls for service that come into the police department, and we look at the time that it takes to manage those. Then the second thing we do is we look at the time that the officers have available. And again, I'm going through this super quick. It's in there. I've done this before with city council. where you look at the number of days an officer works, and then you pull out the vacation days, et cetera. But then also on the other side is how much time they have available during a day. So you can see the officers work an average of 11.3 hours a day. I'm sorry, that should be 11.5, but, and then we pull out the administrative time, and you can see down below what that counts. The meals, the breaks that they have to have, vehicle maintenance, you know, checking out their car, briefing, answering communications, and that's about 2.5 hours a day. 0.5 hours for unrecoverable time. That's when they're stuck at a red light and things like that. And so 8.3 hours a day, you multiply that by the number of days they work, and you can see they have 1,198.68 hours available per year for each officer. So then using both of those figures, we can see if we have this many officers, we know how much time they have available, we know what our calls for service are. What we know then is what percentage of their available time they're spending on those calls for service. So you can see in the step 4, you can see this is our priorities. Priority calls, in progress, injury, you can see all of those. So those things we're going to respond to instantly. And everything below that line would get interrupted by that. So then you look at the incident reports, the administrative tasks they have to do, and the unrecoverable patrol time. This is what the officers, this is their priority, these things. And so really the big question it comes down to, I'm not sure, I'm hoping you can all see that whole thing, especially on the right. You can see where that line cuts off. The respond for calls for service, complete incident reports, administrative task, unrecoverable patrol time, and everything else below that line is what we're calling department directed activity. This is the proactive policing, the community oriented policing, all the things that we attempt to do in partnership with the community to help the quality of life and to help the safety. So as our calls for service go up and the number of officers, if they don't increase at the same time, the things below that line are the things that we end up not being able to do. So right now we have 20 officers assigned to patrol, and that's what we've had for 10 years. So that hasn't changed. So that is what my request is to increase the patrol division by 1 officer per shift. So obviously that would be the 4 officers. And so that would create a squad of 6 officers versus the 5 officers that we have now. Having 5 officers on a shift means at any one time, we're going to have between 3 and 5, depending on how the schedule works. So we have a minimum of 3 officers. And I mean, I would advocate that 3 officer minimum for a city of what I believe is probably 35,000 at this point becomes very difficult. Yesterday was a good example. They had 4 officers on, and you all know the power went out. The cause of that was a DUI hit a power pole. And so an officer had to go with them to the hospital and go through that process with them because they had some slight injuries. And then they had to go and do the booking. So we had an officer out of the city for 6 hours. And so, you know, now we're down to 3 officers in the city. Another example is the other evening when we had 2 accidents up on SR9. It's at Soper Hill, right in the middle of commuting time. And so 2 accidents at the same time. The entire patrol division was out with those accidents. So it becomes very difficult to answer the calls for service, but then also now we get below that line to do the things that the city expects us to do. So, and I won't go into this, but again, based on the 20 officers we have now, we use an easy formula. So we have 20 officers, we know how much time 1 officer has available to them in a year. So we multiply that by 20. We subtract out the times for the calls for service and then divide it by that available time. So what you see is officers have 26% of their time available for all those other things that we expect of them. Now, when the annexation comes and we get to we get to a 40,000 population, if we stay at the 20 officers, that time, that available time will go down into the 10 or the teens. And so what we will have is a patrol division that will be reactive only. They will not have the availability to do all of the other things. So I'm trying to cut it short here a little bit. So really what the request is from the police department is to be able to add one patrol officer to each squad so that we can go to a 4-person minimum, staffing level. The second thing we're asking for is another traffic officer, especially with the annexation, and that being one of our #1 complaints that we receive. And then also a crime analyst is another request that we have. You can see the charts that Anya put together. There are some things that come out in the following, the years to come, but really that's the request that we have, is for those 4 patrol officers. And then if annexation happens, we would wait and see, we would do another, one of those allocation models to see how the annexation impacts us before we were to make any other types of requests. So I know that they asked, we were kind of asked to include our annexation requirements as well. If we saw an increase that got beyond that, we would then ask probably another 2 officers going into 22 or 23 to start building that up. But for right now, we're requesting the 4 patrol officers, the motor officer, and the crime analyst. So I'll stop there because I know there's other folks need to go and take any questions.
Is this work in conjunction with that we just recently, which congratulations by the way, but we just got approved, that we've got our accreditation. Is this part of keeping that accreditation?
This it's not part of keeping accreditation. This was part of our strategic plan to do this staffing study. So accreditation does not say how many officers you have to have. So this is not a part of accreditation.
Great, thank you.
Chief, just for my own clarity, and actually before I ask the question, I just want to say again, thank you for everything that you and your officers do.
Thank you.
Staffing model demonstrates that you're not only very good at your job, but you collectively as a police department are exceptional, considering our crime rates and the level of staffing we currently have. So thank you.
I will tell you, it's challenged my math abilities just a little bit. So.
In the strategic planning document, there is a term called targeted policing. And in listening to your presentation, I'm interpreting targeted policing to be the same thing as department directed or proactive policing for those specific areas that you have listed there. Am I correct?
You are correct. So under this list here, you can see the department directed. One of the first thing is addressing action plan priorities and high crime areas. So that's exactly what we're talking about, looking at the people and the places that are creating the biggest issues and analyzing those and trying to affect those.
Absolutely. And I remember we had a conversation quite some months ago about the importance of data analytics in that body of work. So I just wanted to make sure that I was still following. Thank you.
Chief Dyer, I have a quick question. This has been really informative. I'm thinking about the slide where you showed the kind of the 2 arrows, whereas 911 calls and response calls, yes, increase, and you're focusing more on reactive policing than those department directed activities, community policing activities. There just isn't enough time to sort of address those. Is your and I know there's been a lot of energy lately, both in Lake Stevens and just nationally, around the desire for increased community policing. Do you feel like right now you have the resources to meet that need in Lake Stevens? I guess given what Lake Stevens, how Lake Stevens demographics look now, knowing that Lake Stevens is going to grow, I'm assuming those needs grow. But today, do you feel like you can meet that need?
Tough question. Yes and no. I mean, every call for service, we're gonna answer. That's gonna happen. Are there a lot of things that we would like to do around some of those department directed activities? Are there things that we would like to do that we can't do now? And that answer is yes. We are meeting most of the requests that we get. But there's a lot of things that we would like to initiate that we haven't been able to. So it's a yes and no answer type of thing.
Okay, that's helpful to hear. I appreciate that.
And especially in the line with our patrol officers, a lot of times people want patrol officers to do a lot of things. You know, whether it's, you know, hey, can you come by this meeting? You know, hey, we're having problems over here. Can you do extra patrol? Can you do those things? In that patrol division, it's becoming very difficult to be able to do those things.
Okay. All right. That's good information. Thanks.
Chief Dyer, if I may speak.
Yes.
I think I'm off mute. The reactive policing versus the department directed activities, because I got to go to the training with your police, I would think it would help them to have more department directed activities as far as being visible in the community in a non-reactive function. And that
Right.
could only help their state of mind. And I believe it would help our police across the board. I think it's really tough right now. And I think that would be a good change.
That has been our goal, is to those department directed activities, the community policing, the proactive policing type things, you know, are where we want to be. You know, thus the request, really, because I want to make sure that our officers have the time to be able to do that. Yeah, I'll stop.
Thank you.
Chief, if you could unshare your or stop sharing, then I can share mine again.
Okay, let me. Dun, dun, dun. I believe I've stopped.
I think I'm starting, so hopefully you guys can see me in just a second here. All right, can you guys see me again?
Yep.
Okay. So just to kind of synopsize the chief request. These are he talked about the 2021 requests of the addition of 4 officers. In 2022, he didn't talk much about this, but there would be a request for 2 additional PROACT officers, and I think he talked about the reasons why. And also in 2021, in their operations unit, a traffic officer, a crime analyst, and then 2023 to 25 down the road, they're looking at adding a crime prevention specialist and a park ranger.
And as Anya said, you know, looking at different departments and where needs cross, I also see in the build out of a parks department that park ranger. So certainly, if that happened in the parks department, then that would not be a request from the police department.
Okay, so Public Works, I'm gonna let Eric take over, but I know we just did a Public Works org chart presentation to you, so this one should go by quickly. I will say the numbers are a little bit different just because we took in order for the whole org plan to work, we did a full year salary for every position to make it all match. So the numbers might be a little bit different from what you saw previously. I think we showed you numbers for like the rest of 2020 and 2021. This is for salary for an entire year for these positions and with a 40% benefit. So Eric, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Council. Really not a lot to add over what we brought forward, I guess, a month or so ago. Going into next year, we'd like to take over custodian services citywide. Right now, we contracted out the addition of the new police department and other facilities. I think we can actually save some money versus what we're actually paying now for contracted services. we all know that we're doing this remodel of our offices down there at Public Works, trying to actually get to a spot where we're a fully functioning Public Works department, our own office, our own business, as you might say. But really not a lot of changes. We looked long and hard at the annexation and what that might do to us. But I can answer any questions that you might have. Pretty much we approved the stuff for 2020 a month ago. And then 2021 was adding the street supervisor. And then as the chief mentioned, looking forward into future years, we're working on the parks lead currently this year. And then in 2022, we would be looking at adding a parks supervisor and then adding some additional maintenance worker positions. So pretty straightforward. I can answer any questions.
Go to the next slide too. This kind of synopsizes it in writing on the requests by year. If there's no questions, we can move on.
Great.
Okay. So we'll go to Russ's group.
Okay.
Russ.
Good morning, Council. So the needs for community development, they do continue to evolve. I think we've talked about these over the last couple of years. Some of the things that we continue to face is a lack of administrative support as we get busier. All the staff, continue to try and make up those functions in their own work, which then does take them away from their primary functions, the permit review, etc. One of the biggest issues that's really started to become apparent and particularly in this last year is just the increase in the amount of code enforcement cases we have, not only the amount, but the complexity of code enforcement. We've talked about this position a couple of times in the past. And as we look to annex potentially another 3,000 residents into the city and complete our UGA, really is going to become necessary. And that's also coupled with our booming population with all of the new residents that we've brought into the city. So that's one of the big proposals moving forward into next year, is dividing that code enforcement responsibility out of the current building inspector to allow them to really look at their primary task and specialty, which is inspection of single family homes, and then get a qualified code inspector that has more experience in the law enforcement aspect of that, and make sure that we're doing all of our code enforcement efficiently and effectively. And this couples with our beautification plan, where the city has, made a lot of strides in bringing the city forward. And if we have a proactive code enforcement officer, that allows us to provide better services to make sure our neighborhoods and our gateways, entries are clean and tidy, and promoting our economic development. So that is one big ask. As Anya alluded to previously, and this is where we've played around with the structure a little bit to get a more appropriate span of control. It's still appropriate to add a mid-level supervisor in the planning arena, as well as a supervisor for the permit staff. They continue to be overtaxed, and it has been in the budget, but this year it was one of our voluntary furloughed positions, vacant position not filled for COVID, and waiting to see what those impacts would be. There's also a couple of logistic issues that until the Public Works shop is completed for its remodel, we're really out of room at City Hall to add any bodies. So any positions that I'm proposing to add would be spring to mid-year. And then as we move out into the future, upon annexation if we start getting more development in those areas, obviously it would be important to add another assistant planner, a low-level planner to work on single-family homes, business licenses, and those other things as our community continues to grow and allow the other staff to focus on higher level tasks. The next part of this, well, let me stop here. Does council have any questions on the build out of planning and community development? And then I think we're going to switch gears and talk about the build out of a parks division, which we have talked about in the past, but want to make sure that there's no questions on the building and planning functions first.
Yes, Russ, I do have a question about code enforcement. And one of the issues that always seems to come up is the ability to actually enforce things. And so I'm just wondering, has there been a discussion about possibly putting code enforcement under the police department?
There definitely has been a conversation about that. First off, I'll say our building official has been working with the city attorney's office this year on updates to our code enforcement chapter to put some more teeth into it to simplify the process. So that's one proactive step. The chief and I have definitely had conversations about where does code enforcement belong. I believe the chief has already alluded to that he's not married one way or another to where this position goes, and neither am I. The big thing for me, whether it's in community development or under the police department, that it has to be a fully functioning position, and that means supporting zoning violations as well as other types of more standard nuisance violations. So that's my big concern and would be my 2 cents, but where it lands and the authorities that go with that isn't as big a concern to me.
I would chip in if I may, to say there are advantages on both sides, whether to do it through a police department or to do it through community development. I think the reason at this point that it would make sense to do it through community development is because that aspect of land use, which Russ just alluded to. So to have a police employee enforcing land use issues, I think would be problematic. And so in that regard, it would make more sense for it to be in the community development where that person then has the training and the knowledge and expertise on land use issues that a police code enforcement typically focuses on the nuisance complaints. And so then to put that person into land use issues, that would be a little more, I don't know if I want a police officer enforcing property line disputes or fence disputes. I don't know if that's the best use, if that's the best place for that to be. So I'll stop there. So it makes more sense probably be in community development.
One thing I have seen in other communities, and this is something that the chief and I can definitely talk about, it's maybe a hybrid model where a limited commission could be granted to the code enforcement officer, no matter where they sit, that would allow them to do tickets rather than just notices of violation and letters. So that's something we can explore and see what that would look like.
That would be great. I think maybe, a point in time in the community as the land use becomes less significant portion of our business because of the maturity of the development patterns. Maybe we're not ready to switch that over to police department authority at this point, but maybe keep it under, as you suggest, a hybrid, because so much of our things are land use related at this point. What kind of time frame would you suspect? You mentioned building inspector was working with city attorney to kind of bring up to date our code enforcement. What kind of time frame do you think you're looking at to bring that before the council?
This fall or winter.
Oh, okay. So in the next 3 to 4 or 5 months.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
This year. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, do we want to switch over to parks?
Sure. This just synopsizes what he just talked about, and again, a breakdown. And then here's the parks total.
Okay. And as far as parks go, this is something we've talked about at your last couple of retreats, and staff had laid out a plan for the council that you believed in that slowly builds from each department's various park functions to looking at a point in time, probably 25 to 27, to establish an independent parks department with its own director, and then bringing in the various staff members from the different departments. Again, as the chief mentioned, looking at having a park ranger. From Public Works, they have the maintenance staff and field supervisors. From the community development side, you have the recreation staff. And at some point in the future, it would be appropriate to start building those out again under a more defined department. And again, this is just capturing what we've already discussed at your last retreat and then the prior year, that just lays out this model going from various divisions to an independent department. Any questions from the council on the continued build out leading to a parks department in 25 to 27?
Could you go back to the page you just had up there? So my question would be, Jill Meese is our Parks Planning and Development, and I'm wondering if she might be considered for Parks and Recreation Director, or is that not a fit? I don't know. Just
I
curious.
think that would be presumptive at this time, that if you go to that high level of a position, you want to go to a wide outreach. It may be qualified, but you would want to do, I think, a more wide-ranging review process at that time. I'll hand it off to Gene if he has any more comments on that.
That's fine. I just needed to know how that process worked. Thank you.
Russ, I've got a question. For the seasonals, I see PW crew worker 1. Is that something that can be interchanged with Eric's crew? Or I think in the past, Gene had said, hey, they're really 2 different animals, but is there a way to have, I don't know, we want to make sure those parks continue to look good, and we're continuing to add more parks and trying like trails and stuff. As far as workers out there and taking care of parks, what does that look like, interchanging those 2?
So today, that function is solely under Public Works, and they do bring on seasonals every year. A lot of the time it is for specific parks upkeep, so that would continue. The idea at some point in the future, and there could be some overchange, but as we get to developing more robust parks that are full service parks, there are going to be some differences in the maintenance and landscaping. And if we get a lot of ball fields, the technical maintenance and striping of those. So at some point, there probably will be a distinction. At the current time, it's still fine to have the Public Works crew doing the lawn mowing and weeding and those types of activities.
Great, thank you.
Russ, the only question that I have, and it's kind of the same question during the retreat. I just wonder, we're adding parks pretty quickly, and it's not just the physical space of the parks, but it's the complexity of the parks that we're adding as well. Is there a reason why it's not appropriate to have a more aggressive progression into the establishment of a parks department?
The only significant limitation, and I think this is what we had talked about previously, was just the financial impact solely. That red line that we've talked about gets there faster with a more aggressive build out. But, again, that's at council's desire. If, you want to expedite this plan, that's definitely, I think, doable from everyone else's perspective.
I'm just recognizing the importance of green space to a community, and just wondering if it needs to be this, at a very, very gradual pace, where we're talking about proposals of 2025 through 2027, that's approaching a decade from now for completion. I just wonder if there isn't a way to look at this happening sooner.
Sure. Anya and I and Jean and the other affected departments, we can definitely go back and look at this and see if there's a more streamlined timeline. Maybe a lot of it depends on our economic development strategy, obviously trying to match the dollars to the resources. But yeah, we can go back and see if there's, and finance, of course, with a more robust, quicker pace that we can look at.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
And as Russ said, all these positions are general fund, like pretty much 100% general fund is my understanding. So I think that's part of it.
Russ, could you clarify one thing? Under the box, the heading estimated cost of changes, it talks about reclassify parks and recreation manager to director.
Mm-hmm.
Yet up on the boxes above, we don't have a parks and recreation manager. We have parks plan and development coordinator and parks and recreation director. I don't see where we have an existing parks and recreation manager.
So going back to the community development slides, as part of this proposal, again, as we talk about span of control, at some point over the next couple of years, it's probably appropriate to add parks manager, supervisor, what have you, to start looking at the day-to-day recreation programming, the park development issues, and those things. So it is actually created under planning and community development, and then it would carry over into that next slide. And I think the way that Anya presented it really just shows the shift to a director. Is that correct, Anya?
Yep. So yeah, community development, the Parks and Recreation Manager would be created in 2023 to 25, and it would be under community development still at that point. And then a couple slides later, it gets reclassified to a director, and that's how the Parks Department forms as its own department.
And that's about a $50,000 difference, it looks like. So I guess to Councilmember Frederick's question, that 23 to 25, depending on financial needs, we could go straight to a director and forego a manager if, that's where the financial forecasts lead us.
So the upcoming 21, 22, we're not seeing a total cost increase in 92. You're talking more out in 23 to 25.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
The question that I have is, I understand the length of time in this, the way that you have it portrayed, but it looks to me like we're still mixing positions for parks, quote unquote, into community development and public works. It seems to me that we might be better off putting it all under one or the other. And I would think it would be better off under public works for now until we get it to its own department. I would rather do the same as what Sean was saying and get it done quicker than later. But it seems like we're just kind of mixing and matching in here. Is there a reason that we did that? I know you guys have thought this through really well, but what's the reasoning behind that?
It's the expertise of the different functions. So the more administrative and planning functions have been kept in planning and community development, because it's also, say the current Parks and Planning Development Coordinator, part of her function is the planning of parks that goes into the comprehensive plan and hiring consultants, development standards, versus the more field-oriented side that's in public works. Their expertise is maintenance and construction. So that's where the separation has been contained. The new events coordinator, that's really going to marketing and economic development, again, which hasn't been a typical function of public works doing maintenance and construction activities. So that's why there has been a separation to this point.
Okay, thank you for that making me understand that.
Russ, would making a manager slash director, however we want to do it, would that create more opportunities to maybe go after more grant money? I mean, I'm sure we're doing that now, but having someone in there, more of a managerial type thing, would that be part of it, is having them get after maybe more grants and stuff for parks and help maybe move that whole department along quicker per se?
I think across the board, anytime we're able to add more staff, whether it's a manager or another staff position, is going to enable us to be more proactive and looking at grants. For example, staff presented three RCO grants yesterday, but I think when we add more staff, it does free up time to look at less typical granting opportunities.
Great, thanks.
All right. Any other questions for us?
Anya, where does this put us? How many more departments do we have still to go?
A couple, they're all smaller ones though. I know we're getting close on time here.
We are on that time.
Yeah. So,
Okay, thanks.
all right, here's the executive proposed org chart. Gene, if you want to jump in here.
I would love to, but first I want to make an announcement that the mayor is a brand new father. I just got the text. Everybody's healthy and doing well.
Yay.
So thank you, council, for joining us this morning. And thank you, Anya, for all your work putting this together. This was a ton of work, and I know you've been working on it for months, so I appreciate that. We've got the org chart up top. We're a pretty lean organization as you look at it. I will quickly run down through here. One of the things I want to work on is reclassifying the IT manager to director. It's been an interesting change in the IT services, how this has evolved over the 4 years that I've been here. When I got here, it was primarily just desktop computers, a few laptops, and cell phones. And now that's expanded to most everybody has a laptop so they can work from home. They've got hotspots now if they don't have internet. All that's maintained by IT services. IT services created our parks and municipal campus security system. So we now have that in place, and it's expandable to expand across the city. That is maintained and was designed by IT, and there's software systems that have been put in place to be able to keep video footage and archive that. We're in the process of building out our own server system that will be located in the police department, and the county site will act as backup. So that's new on IT's plate. Just the transparency of the city as a whole. We've implemented lots of new software systems so our finances can be more transparent. We've been expanding our website. We've brought on drones that are doing flyovers. There's software that goes with that. GIS is coming on board. That's new. We've added the Channel 21 services where we can go live. We're YouTubing right now. That's all been done by IT. Just the system security as well in the last couple of years has had the need to be more robust. As you know, there's hackers all around the world, and now we have to monitor this 24 hours a day, keep changing software, educating the staff. So constant training going on. That's been new. The Wi-Fi system for the city has expanded. So we have Wi-Fi available to users all around our park system here in North Cove. And then just the software packages that alone that the city has to maintain has expanded tremendously. So in my mind, we're overdue to reclassify this to a director position. So that's being proposed for next year. Reclassifying the deputy clerk position. Right now, we've got a mix of AP in the deputy clerk position, and the finance department is so lean that we need to be able to split that out to where we have a full-time additional person, if you will, Adri moving over to doing full-time work in finance. And you can imagine the amount of receipts that go through her desk every month. Every project you see out here comes with receipts from every nut and bolt to broom that's purchased, goes through her desk. She codes those and gets that paid. And that work is just getting more and more intense. So we're looking at moving her into full-time finance. And with that, that'll leave the hole in the deputy clerk position. So we're looking at filling that with a deputy clerk executive assistant. Currently over in the administrative side of things, we don't have any executive assistants. So every PowerPoint you see produced, every white paper that goes to the Olympia, and when we meet with the representatives and Congress people, we create all that ourselves. Russ does a ton of that work. We just don't have the executive administrative staff. So that's what we're looking at there. And I will turn it over to Anya or Josh if they want to talk a little bit more about those changes.
I think we'll go to finance next. I think the only last thing on your plan is the establishment of an emergency manager, half-time in 2022, which I believe is something that the city's requested before.
Correct. Right now, Commander Bezzizo does the majority of that work, and he needs to be focusing on police services. So we really need help in the emergency management side of things. There might be an opportunity to partner with the sister city around here to have that service provided. So we will look at all options to fill that need.
Any questions for Jean? Okay, moving right on to finance, and Josh is gonna kind of give us a synopsis of Barb's plans.
All right, thank you. I'll just start off talking about what Jean just left with, which is the accountant. And so, yes, we would want to bring Adri over and be full-time in our department. On top of the increased workload for AP, we would also give her more duties. And the most important thing for us is to have each accountant cross-trained, and so that if Adri's gone, we can still do AP. If Joan's gone, we can still do payroll. If I'm gone, people can still approve and get things through the city, because when one of us is gone, we still have the workload still has to get done. And a good example is, Barb's out. And so when Barb's out, we need someone to step up and do what I'm doing right now. So for cross training and segregations of duties for the accounting department, I think bringing her over here full time would be really good. The public works accountant is something that we talked about. It's actually a good thing for us and the public works department. Right now, we spend a lot of time on capital projects. So this position with Envision would be, they're going to help public works do capital improvement planning. They're going to help do asset management. They're going to help do budgeting. They're going to help with equipment replacement planning, and just backing up us and the public works department at the same time. So that's to me, is kind of a good joint request that would be kind of shared together and take a load off us and take a load off the public works department. Looking in the future, we want to bring back passports. You guys know we was in the police department and we kind of turned it off during the for COVID. And so it is a great service. And as more and more cities are starting to turn their programs off, I think it's a good opportunity for us to turn ours on and provide a good service. And if you set it up right, it can be cost neutral. So you get money for fees for processing passports. So that's something that we want to look at. Looking out farther in the future, we really purchasing is a big thing here. So one of those accountants we're talking about in the future would maybe be like a consolidated purchasing person. So we would bring all the purchasing into one person, and their job would be to get us the cheapest stuff using any sort of cooperative agreement, looking out everywhere, try to get us the best price on everything that we purchase. And then as we grow, just looking at another accountant and passports and things like that. So I'll leave it at that. And if you have any questions.
And on this slide, there's just a summary of the additional duties these new accountants would absorb. And I do want to just mention the allocation of the cost of the new accountant was based on what the finance department's currently paying for Adri versus what the executive department is paying for salaries for Adri. So that was split on your spreadsheet breakdown. You're just going to see maybe I think it's a cost neutral maybe thing for a reclassification. What the plan would be to establish a new accountant basically and just redo the job description for the deputy clerk. So you will see a little bit of difference on that. Okay, moving on to IT. Troy?
Hey. All right. Great. Well, to kind of build on some of the other things that people have talked about, as Jim was alluding to, the city continues to grow. The demand for IT services continues to increase. Primarily what we are focusing on right now that we see that is a big gap in our current staffing right now is the application analyst GIS position. This is a dual position, kind of working with administering some of our enterprise applications. We found within our departments that we have with Laserfish, building out these complex workflows and templates. There's a lot of process automations with forms that we just can't seem to get to. So there's just a lot of missing opportunities for us to be able to develop out some of these solutions. We have another major component that is underserved here is our GS asset management system. There's so much that goes into developing out the solution, from creating the workflow templates, service requests, offering these portals for the citizens to be able to put in requests for maybe their stormwater retention ponds to be cleaned out. A lot of that takes time to build out those processes and applications. GIS is going to be huge. So right now we're just looking at, this is being very conservative too, because I see that, as GIS kind of, starts to take a center position on offering story maps for parks, planning, where we're doing with capital projects. You can create these really good, visually appealing websites where you're laying out where these major projects are taking place. All that stuff is going to be these huge improvements. There's going to be new applications that can be built on top of the GIS infrastructure to help serve out citizens and get this information out there. The other thing that we hear a lot from these departments is just looking at, we have all this data and we have these databases and data sets. Right now, we just don't have the manpower to really look at those things to analyze that data, to build in some Power BI dashboards where we can get these reporting instead of having to run these manual reports and generate these things and to put them into a way that we can present them. There's a way for us to do this with some of the tools we already have. We have Power BI, we have Smartsheets. We can be able to take this data, get this thing analyzed, and someone that knows how to really work with databases, relational databases, and be able to visualize this information, put this onto our websites, put this onto our internal portals, be able to offer this up for people to just look at this, get the high level visibility as what's taking place within our department. So at some point, I do feel that, when we look at all these different applications and services that are kind of coming down the pipe, those two positions will probably eventually have to split because there's going to be a huge demand on GS infrastructure and a huge demand on just maintaining these applications. And so that's really what I'm looking at right now, but I'm being very conservative as far as what I'm trying to accomplish right now. So, but if you guys have any questions, let me know.
I will just add, Troy, that we didn't talk about it in the Public Works org chart, but the GIS analyst is already funded under Public Works Department, and the plan is to move that under IT with a split with applications and use the funding in Eric's Public Works org chart to do more of a storm field technician to collect the data to support the GIS function. So they've been collaborating, Troy and Eric, and still are working on what those position split would look like. At this point, this is just our plan to move forward is to split that kind of funding to support that's how we would support the GIS plan.
Yeah, and some of this stuff we've got, I've been working with Snow 911, which would kind of help with the police department on being able to take our data that's generated within Snow 911. It has all of our call information. We're going to basically replicate that data to our databases. This position can help build out these reports and dashboards to give them real-time statistics as far as what's taking place. We can take that data and map it onto our GS infrastructure. So there's just so many opportunities for us to really grow out these different systems, but we just don't have the manpower to do that. And if you look at the complexity of some of these high-level systems, it takes a lot of time to do. So, and we've got a lot of projects with our, buildings being built, City Hall, all those things just kind of spread me pretty thin. And, Carter with the police department, they've got tons of, things that happen all the time, their scanners, their MBTs, the different applications. So we're just thin, very thin. So that's my plan.
All right, any questions for Troy? Okay, so last but not least, HR and risk management. Right now we've got myself and Julie. What we're proposing is a half-time HR technician in 2021 that would eventually move to full-time in 2023 to 25. Right here, you'll see the summary of duties and the reasoning behind this. It would provide, be able to implement and track learning management systems, maintain HR filing systems. We can go all electronic using Laserfiche. Currently, we don't have the manpower to do that. Records retention and destruction can always be done more effectively, efficiently, on time. This person would be more like a lower level, assisting in recruiting and assisting with job postings moving forward. With an add in FTEs in all these departments, it increases the support and workload needed for HR to recruit, especially if you're doing internal promotions and developments. That creates a ripple effect of recruitments down the road. It really increases the workload of HR. And then going into risk management, this person would be able, my plan is to add a better service for risk management and claims on our city website, having a more user-friendly and more efficient practice for our claims support. This person would be doing HR reporting, salary surveys, drafting correspondence, tracking our FMLA program and L&I, and then serving on some of the employee committees and helping get those going to maintain. So that's pretty much it. Trying to cut it a little short since I know we're short on time. So let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so just to wrap up, this would be the staffing breakdown if the plan is adopted. So this shows the current number of FTEs versus the future number of FTEs here for each department. And then this last slide is about developing a solution plan. So if this plan were to adopted, we talked about funding the plan. We strategically are using a gradual approach because of the budget and staggering throughout the year, even, maybe deferring a hire of a position in 2021 to June to save on some of the costs. Annual review of rollover budgets to make sure that we are doing cost savings in order to support these salaries. And just trying to find, I think it was Russ, talking about economic development, finding additional revenue sources to support the addition of these salaries. And then the execution, we talked about making sure we're recruiting a diversified talent and make sure those align with the city competencies and the mission and the vision. Making sure we get the right people in the door for this plan is really important. And then maintaining and strengthening our employee development tools that we currently have to make sure that we're, they're getting the proper training. And that's one of the things with HR right now. We're trying to get a training program, a learning management system, making sure that we are evaluating our employees' performance, giving them feedback, and improving all of those steps in the employee life cycle is really important to carry out the strategic plan. And then office space, where are we going to house these people? I think it's always a common question. I know with teleworking, that's working out really well for us, alternative schedules, but I know we are also planning potentially doing this civic campus. So we are thinking in the future of what that means if we are adding and adopting this plan on where we're going to put these folks. So That is the end of my slides, and I'm sorry we went over, but I think it's a really important topic, and I hope this meets what you guys were thinking of in the retreat in February. And if you have any questions, fire away. Okay. Well, I think we're ready to move on then. Thank you guys so much.
Great, we'll jump right into the budget review.
All right, Kelly's gonna share the presentation for me here.
Yeah, Anya, can you stop sharing?
Yes. Okay.
Well, while she's doing that, my presentation is going to be the start of the budget process here. So what we're going to talk about is just 2020, how we think we're going to end with the information we have now, and then looking at 2021 and basically what a base budget if we just continue operations as normal and there's no approvals, no departmental requests, just kind of going forward as we are right now. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about 2020 and our estimates, and then stop for questions, and then I'll start into the 2021 baseline. Here in front of you is our budget calendar right now. So today, the 25th, we're talking about estimated revenues, preliminary budget, preliminary meaning kind of base budget. October 6th is when we will have the mayor's budget to you, talking about the base budget plus any requests that we want to put forward and put in the budget. And then that'll be your first review of the preliminary budget. And then from there, we're going to discuss the budget through multiple council meetings. And then you get out there, we have to have public hearing for property tax. And then you get into your final public hearing. There is a December 8th continuation of the public hearing on December 8th. So that's our timeline for right now. Go ahead. The next slide. Okay, so this is a lot. You have it printed. It's bigger on the printed material or on your PDF that got sent out. So a little harder to see on your computer. So what this is this is 2020, what we budgeted, and what I have put in so far for what we estimate the year to end. And so we're going to leave this up, and I'm just going to talk a little bit. You can take the notes off, Kelly, if you can.
Sorry, Josh, I'm working on it. Hold
Okay,
on a second.
I'll continue to, I'll talk while you're doing it. So we'll just start with kind of the major funds and what our expectation is. So general fund, we're expecting the general fund to land about on budget. So that's really good. I take a look at, there's a lot of revenues in general fund. If I take a look at the major revenues, so you're talking property tax, sales tax, utility tax, when you combine all those major ones, we did really good. They're up altogether about 2%. So all the major revenues are doing okay. The things that didn't do good, interest is down a lot, 50,000 from what we budgeted. That's just because interest rates are down. We invest our money in the LGIP. The LGIP interest rate is 0.2 or something. So the interest is way down. Oh, you can go back. I'll come back to this one. Another big impact to the general fund was permit revenue. We budgeted high. We weren't quite sure how much time people were going to be put on their timesheets to transfer from the permit fund. So we were under by 400,000. So we had to change our forecast and we had to update our estimated endings. We're not transferring as much out of the permit fund right now as we thought. So that's one impact that's here, and it's an impact looking forward into 2021 and forward. But as we get new positions and things, we're trying to put as much to the permit fund as we can. And the way we do that right now is we just have people put their time on their timesheets, and then we charge that permit fund for all those salary costs. Looking at just some prior year priorities, the one thing we started doing is putting 300,000 of construction sales tax in the general fund. So we continue to do that. And we've had enough construction sales tax. All 300,000 has gone into the general fund. If we take a step down and look at the permitting fund, they're up 17%. So that fund is doing really good. That's zoning and building permits for the most part. Building permits are up 17%. We budgeted, 1.5 million, and we're at estimated to end at 1.7, 1.8 million. So that's 270,000 more in building permits. Zoning and subdivision is up 15%. We budgeted 480, and we're estimating in the 540s, 550s by the end of the year. So that fund continues to do really well. Like I was saying, that's restricted revenue. We can only get the revenue out of there for actual time spent on permitting activities. We got the reserve fund. This fund, for the most part, gets all the remaining construction sales tax over 300,000. So it's up 10%. So we budgeted 60,000 of construction sales tax to go in there, and we're estimating 950,000 by the end of the year. So this fund is up over 350,000 over budget. So we've got the 950 there plus the 300,000 in the general fund. So construction sales tax is doing really good this year, and it makes up the bulk of our sales tax increase for 2020. Like we say before, we don't budget that to be used too much because it's kind of a one-time revenue. So we've been tucking it away over in the reserve fund. If you look at the revenues of that fund, the reason why it's 3.2 million is because we use that fund to loan money for the mill. As we build the mill out, we would loan money out, and then we would reimburse the fund back with the grant in different funds. So when you look at that fund, you'll see that it's 3.2 million, but that will drop off in 2021. Looking at this general fund expenditures, we are looking to be about 5% under, and that's reasonable considering we've delayed positions for one, so there's staffing savings. Also, looking through the data, we're not using any travel or any training, so we're under on all training. We've got reimbursed for all the things we thought we were going to go to. I also took a look. We're about $100,000 under on jail costs, so that was a pretty big line item. And also a lot of requests that departments made in 2020, we delayed or just didn't do. And so those items could be rolled forward in 2021 as a budget request, or they could just drop off. But there was a lot of items that we just delayed or didn't do for COVID reasons. If you look at the contingency fund expenditures, the reserve fund, they're up 10. And that's mostly because we have a placeholder for CARES Act expenditures in there. So right now we have CARES Act revenues going in and then CARES Act expenditures going out. So it's just, that's like a one-time thing that's happening for the CARES Act. So I just put, it's a placeholder right now that we're assuming that we're gonna get all the grant funds and then spend it all in the same year. Looking down just to the other big operating funds real quick, the street fund, revenues are down 3%. Well, that's mostly because of motor vehicle fuel tax, down 116,000 from what we thought. That's reasonable considering most people are working from home. They're not driving. So, and we figure that trend could continue into the future. So that does not help the street fund looking out into our forecast. The expenditures are about zero. It was kind of a net effect. We were under on salaries and benefits, but we were a little over on pavement preservation operating costs. But the net effect there was pretty much right on budget. And then the other fund I just want to talk about is the stormwater fund, the other big operating fund. It's shown here, it's actually three funds. It's the storm fund, the operating fund, the debt fund, and the capital fund. So they're all commingled here, so it's a little deceiving. But the main 410 fund, the main operating fund, the stormwater revenues, the main revenue is the storm fee that was billed by the county. That's right on budget. So the storm funds for the revenue is pretty much on budget. And then the storm expenditures are under by about 4%. And that's mostly because of salaries and benefits, unfilled positions. The other thing I want to note is 410 transferring about a little over $2 million into the capital fund. So the other funds that are commingled in there are the debt fund and the capital fund. So the capital fund is going to get a couple $1 million from 410. The other fund, the debt fund, is just pays for the decant debt and the Vector debt. And so 410 just transfers money into that fund. So it pretty much, the revenues and expenditures are always going to be just whatever the debt payments are. So nothing special there. Just a quick look at the like mitigation funds. The park mitigation funds are up. They're doing really well. REIT 1 and REIT 2 revenues are pretty much on budget. And the traffic mitigation funds, 301 funds, they're about on a budget, but a little bit low for some mitigation like TIZ1 and different areas like that. We're still working on the 2020 estimated ending for capital projects. There's still things that are coming in. So a lot of the projects, we just assume they're spent. And if they're not, then we'll roll forward those expenditures into 2021. So we still have to wait a little bit for those to come in. That's all I'm going to say, just kind of a synopsis for the year for 2020 going into the big ones. Go ahead and go to the next one, Kelly. What I wanted to show here is the general fund, permit fund, and most of our big funds. I just wanted to show our major revenue streams, like I was saying. Most of our major revenue streams for our estimated endings have done well. If you look at sales tax, that's the combination of the general fund and the reserve fund. So the 10% increase is, 8 or 9% is just related to construction sales tax. We've forecasting about a $70,000 increase in just kind of base sales tax related to retail sales and things like that. But overall, we're pretty happy with that. During these uncertain times, that all of our revenue streams did pretty good. Minus interest. And the other big impact, like I was saying, was just permit transfers from the permit fund into the general fund. So just trying to make time up. So I don't have too much to update on. So basically we're ending the year on target with revenues for the general fund, and we're a little bit under on expenditures due to position savings and COVID and training and things like that. So I will end that part here and just open it up for any discussion about estimated ending for 2020. No, we want to move forward. I would say that we're in the budget process still. So these things could change. We've got a couple more months of data. Things could come in better. We'll change the estimated ending. We'll change the forecast. So things are still fluid. So these are just preliminary numbers looking out into the future here. Okay. We'll jump into 2021. Starting the budget process here. So what we have here is just the same estimated endings that we had before there. And then the next column is our 2021 starting this initial budget. This initial baseline budget is pretty conservative. We kind of built a conservative base, and as data comes in, we'll add to that. But I'll just go through just kind of step by step here. The general fund says -6%. That's almost all related to the CARES Act. We are getting a huge revenue increase just in that 1 year from CARES Act. So that increase is basically from that. If you take that away, our general fund starting is pretty flat. We're budgeting right now just basically the same as 2020. So a flat line across the board for sales tax. Property taxes just going up 1%. There's another slide here I'll show about utility tax. It's all pretty flat. I had to lower the permit revenue from the permit fund just to be more in line with what we think it is. The permit fund going into next year is we're keeping the budget pretty high, 1.5 million for building permits, 500,000 for zoning permits. So we're keeping that fund going, not as high as what we have right now, but a little bit lower. We've got the reserve fund. That fund is getting construction sales tax. So our estimate is 800,000 in construction sales tax to that fund. And the other portion is just interest. So, and if you look out into the 2021 expenditures for the reserve fund, it's zero. And the reason we're doing that is because at this point, we really need that reserve fund to help the general fund. So at one point, we were hoping that that would be one-time expenditures with one-time revenue, but just the way operating revenues to expenditures look, we're going to have to start basically not spending any money out of that fund to help support the general fund until we look out in the future and look at economic development. If you look at the expenditures, we'll have a slide here in a sec, but it's very flat too. It's actually slightly less than 2020, and I'll talk about why that is. The other funds, the street fund and stormwater funds, I have a little slide on in just a little bit. So if we look at just quickly traffic mitigation, that's the it says capital project development. The revenue is 5.4 million. That's because of 20th Street project. We're assuming to get $3.5 million in grants. So that's just a capital project coming forward. I was going to say for the 2020 initial budget, we are still in the process of doing capital project stuff. So when we look at the 2021 initial expenditures, we are still in the process of figuring out what we need to add for 2021. So most of the projects you see here are just kind of ones that we know are going to roll forward. We haven't sat down and added new projects yet for 2021. Looks like there's the stormwater fund is not zero. That's some sort of misplaced number there, but we'll talk about the stormwater fund in a sec. The stormwater revenues are going up according to the plan, 3% plus a percent increase for population. So that fund is continuing to follow the plan that we set out with FCS. Just real quick, 302, the next fund, park mitigation. We assume working with planning that fund's going to get a lot of park mitigation. I think we budgeted $2.2 million. And so I've kind of talked to Russ to make sure that still makes sense. And we're thinking yes. So next year we should be getting a lot of park mitigation. So that's good for the parks and the park capital. If you look at 2020, just looking back a little bit about park mitigation, we were over budget by 38%. So that fund is growing, which is good. We're wanting to invest in our parks. So that's really good timing. Other than that, I think I'll end the initial budget there. You've got REIT. We're expecting the same amount of REIT coming in as we did last year. A lot of these funds have, roll forward projects, or they have changes in grants. Like we got a grant in 2020, we're not going to get it in 2021. So that accounts for a lot of ups and downs in those funds. But from just looking at revenues and not grants that are coming in, or we're not going to get anymore, we're projecting the same amount of REIT for the REIT funds. And then if you look down just real quick at like the equipment replacement funds, those are just standard allocations based on equipment replacement. Money goes in, and then on allocation based on their equipment, and then they spend the money on equipment replacement. So the gist of it is we're down 38% overall funds. Like I was saying, that's going to change because we're still working on capital, so that can make a big adjustment. But just looking at it in general, revenues baseline is flat. Expenditures baseline in the general fund is also flat. So that's kind of our conservative start into the budget process.
Josh, this is Angie. My apologies if you've already commented on this. Do these 2021 expenditures, I'm not seeing salaries and benefits. I just wondered if this included, based on the last presentations, the projected additional staff increases in salaries and benefits for 2021.
Yeah, so what this will include is any decisions you guys have made, the council has made in 2020. So this includes the public works stuff. This includes like the chief and city manager. This includes even the full-time mayor. So these numbers include up to the last council meeting. I also put in like the Bob Stowe contract you guys approved. I think I said the name right. So the Stowe contract, those are in the 2020 estimated ending. And then they also roll forward into 2021.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Angie, was your question, does it include all the requests that were made for 21? Was that your question?
My question was, does it include yes, the requests based on the presentation we just listened
No,
to this
then
morning?
I misled.
My understanding is that it doesn't include the requests. It only includes what we have already approved. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it only includes decisions have been made in 2020. And that's the baseline for 2021. The 2021 initial doesn't include any requests from any departments, doesn't include any of the strategic plan as a baseline.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
And next week, as departments we're talking, we'll be adding those requests into the 2021 budget proposal, which will be my initial budget plus all the requests. It'll be all added together. So next slide, I just want to talk about utility tax. The council has made that choice in 2019.
I have a question.
Oh,
if I
go
may.
for it.
Okay, just clarification. Street fund assumptions for 2021. I wanted to know why the sidewalk projects were removed from the street fund in 2019 and included in the sidewalk capital project fund. I just wanted clarification on that. Does that mean we're not funding sidewalks suddenly, or am I misreading that?
You're not necessarily misreading it. I mean, that's a couple slides ahead, but I'll jump there real quick. It's just
I'm sorry. We're not there yet. Okay.
It's just saying that the street fund had been transferring money into the to that sidewalk project fund. That fund has more money than we do in projects. So it's just, we just stopped transferring money into that fund at $200,000 a year. We have a couple more years. So yeah, thank you, Kelly. If you look at the sidewalk fund,
do you want me to go?
No, actually I have it. I can deviate here just real quickly.
Okay.
If I look at that fund, if we look at the ending cash, it'll start 2021 with $500,000. So we just don't need to transfer any. I mean, we'll have to look at transferring it in the future, but for now we don't need to. So we are doing sidewalk projects, yes. You know, looking long term, Mary, it's going to be a decision making process because the fund will run out of money if we have to transfer 200,000 for too long. So that's just a kind of a priority thing that we'll have to talk about in the future. Yes.
One last question before you move on. Earlier, you mentioned in response to Councilmember Jorstad's question that all of the things we've approved, including the full-time mayor, had been included in these projections. And I just want to clarify whether or not an actual determination on the mayor's full-time salary has been made, because the salary commission, to my knowledge, hasn't met yet to determine what that salary is going to be. And if so, were other projections, the estimates that went into that staff package used as a placeholder there, how you were able to determine that number, please?
John, you should check out the Herald.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Councilmember Frederick, if I could.
Question, Josh.
Yeah, Salary Commission did meet last night for the second time, actually, and did make a motion to set his salary at $80,000.
So was that the number used here?
It was not. I used a higher number. So we will.
Oh, good.
We will adjust it. It'll make an impact. And that's what I was saying is, you know, we'll have to update this, and we'll be continually updating it up until the budget. But that is, I think we put in 100, 110. So we're, and then the benefits too. So we'll be under by 40,000 or so. We're going to be able to reduce expenditures by 40,000 or so. And it will continue in the forecast too. So.
Good, thank you. No, I had not read the Herald yesterday. It was a long night for me.
It's actually in today's Herald. They were right on top of things last night.
I want to know how you guys had all this time to be reading the Herald in the morning. What the heck? I had to go to work this morning.
You got to set up alerts.
Yeah.
Kelly, go ahead and go back to the utility tax or I think it's the next one. Okay, so here I'm just saying that, you know, the council made a priority decision, you know, to increase utility tax. And so I just want to show the impact of how that's working. So it's just a informational to say that, you know, it is helping the city by doing that. Telephone is kind of a weird one. It seems to be decreasing over time, and I don't know exactly why that is, but electric is going up, gas is going up, water kind of goes up and down, and garbage for sure. All that garbage utility tax goes in the street fund. So that is very helpful for payment preservation, keeping the lights on our streets. So just a recap of saying that that decision does have an impact.
Josh, is the telephone, it doesn't include cell phone, does it?
It does.
It does?
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I'm saying I don't know. It's kind of interesting.
Well, one thing is people are starting to turn off their landlines, so.
Yeah, it could be part of that. You know, I kind of think of cell phone bills are pretty expensive. So, I mean, I can't explain it really. I don't know if data plans are just getting better, phone plans are getting cheaper, or families are consolidating and just having one plan, or, you know, I don't know. But that's the way it's looking. And as annexations occur, these numbers will be impacted as well. The note here at the bottom is we don't charge any utility taxes on sewer, stormwater, or cable. And there's a note about the storm fee for the school district, which I'm going to talk about a little bit when I'm talking about stormwater fund. So that's just kind of a recap of one of our major revenue streams here. Okay, go to the next one, Kelly. Okay, so starting with our baseline assumptions for 2021, we got some data from the assessor. So I plugged those in. We're estimating 3.775 million for property tax. That's not the full property tax amount. A little bit goes to the street. So a little note there that 1.45 million or so is going into the street fund. It looked like assessed values were about 8% looking at that data. And if I calculate a levy rate, it looks like it'll be looking like less than $1, 0.98, 0.99 cents per thousand. So just in a little example, I know that's nobody has $100,000 house, but just for simplicity, they pay $98.90. Property taxes is basically we get 1% on the prior year plus new construction. The 1% equates to like 50,000. The rest of it is new construction. And so the city had a lot of new construction, and that makes up the majority of the increase in our property taxes. Sales tax, this number we're starting with is like 10,000 or 14,000 more than what we budgeted in 2020. And that's something that, as I look at data, as I look at sales tax coming in, we'll probably adjust. Typically we budget higher. I kind of made a little note here to talk about our thought process. I looked kind of back at the data, and in 2018, we budgeted, for 2019, we budgeted 4% more than 18. And in 2019, we got all 4% that we budgeted plus another 9% on top of that. So 2019 was a huge increase in sales tax, 13% or so. When we look at 2019 to 2020, we did a budget increase of about 5%. And it looks like we're going to get basically 5%. So to me, that's saying that there is some slowing of spending. And so instead of increasing the 2020 number by 5% up, I just kind of held it flat for now. So that's something that we'll be looking at, maybe adjusting. But for now, just as a baseline, I just said, okay, you know, I see there's just not much data, but a 1 year kind of look of data, it's slowing down. So just to be conservative for baseline, I just said, we're just going to put it basically at 2020. The other reasons are, you know, uncertainties. I say other uncertainties because I think, you know, election is uncertainty. I mean, there's just a bunch of stuff out there. So it's just conservative for now. And we've got a couple months to mull this stuff over. A little note about the permit fund. We already talked about this, but based on development, those are the numbers for the permit fund. That fund is doing very well. Okay, let's go to the next one. Oh, I got two screens up, sorry. Okay, so general fund assumptions 2021. Let's we're gonna look at this next slide and then jump back here, Kelly. So go to the next slide real quick. So this is a look at all the departments, looking at our estimated ending and our baseline. And so what I just wanted to say here was that overall, the general fund, we're budgeting a slight decrease over estimated actuals for 2020. And so I just wanted to explain the differences by department here. All of these departments include a COLA increase and an increase for benefits. What we did is just made a lot of little changes in the background, decreasing a lot of one-time stuff, decreasing things here and there. So we are paying a higher salary amount going into 2021, but then there's other reductions that are offsetting that. So that the baseline general fund number is just slightly lower than what we had in 2020. I mean, for budget to budget, sorry. And as things go forward, we'll be looking at modifying anything that we think we want to change. But I just wanted to show that, to just show that it's a accumulation of a bunch of stuff in the background for each department. But it does include salary increases, benefit increases. So let's go back to that previous slide. So saying that, it's just a slight decrease. Salaries and benefits make up 10.5 million of that. So current staffing levels up to what you guys have approved so far. The CPIW that we use, it was 1%. That was the cost of living increase. We have contracts that are minimums. So the Teamsters minimum was 1, the Guild's minimum was 1.5. So we're going to pay those. And we decided to go in the middle with non-reps, just kind of split the baby there. So that's our initial projections for the COLAs, which is pretty low, really, considering most years it's usually 2% or more. Medical costs are going up a little bit more than it has in previous years. It's between 5 and 11%. We have 11% in the budget right now, so those numbers could come down as the numbers come in. So that's kind of the baseline for general fund. And we can go ahead and skip the next one and go to the street fund, Kelly. Okay, so here's the street fund. The property tax allocation that I was talking about earlier, 1.5 million, the 28%. Motor vehicle fuel tax and multimodal tax, 645. The motor vehicle fuel tax has been reduced from what we've used to have on our forecast because of what we're seeing in our 2020 actuals. So that'll have an impact on a later slide on the fund balance. Garbage utility tax still going into there, and that's really helping that fund out. If you look at the expenditures, you've got your normal salaries and benefits, but you've got the payment preservation, contributions for equipment, and that note at the bottom was just a note that we used to do transfers and we haven't done any for a while. But when that sidewalk fund runs out of money, we'll be looking at trying to figure out where to get funding for it. And it's usually historically been from the street fund. Estimated ending, just a note that, baseline, this fund will end, we project, with a little over $1 million if we just did a baseline budget. Okay, the stormwater fund, kind of what I was saying, the revenues is pretty much increased based on a schedule from an FCS study with a service level study that we did. So that's in there. We got phosphorus milfoil treatments that we do, 20,000. The budget is just salaries and benefits, just continuing staff that we have and decisions we've made. We got debt service, that includes the decant, that includes the Vactor. And the next thing, there's the transfer to capital. So 2020, we did 2 million. In 2021 and looking into the future, I did $1 million a year. but that's something we're still talking about as capital projects for stormwater. We don't have a plan for me to budget to exactly. So I just have estimates in there looking out into the future. And like it says right there, capital projects, we are still working on it. And that's something we'll be working on next week. The other note I wanted to make is not in 2020, but looking into 2021 in the future, we have that the school district is going to be paying the city now. Their exemption will be going away, and they'll be paying the city, we estimate $250,000 a year for their stormwater impact. And that's something that the city will bill to the district. We can't add that to a school district because they don't have property taxes. So that's something that we'll be adding into 2021. Okay, the next slide. It's just looking at those two funds, the fund balance. So the street was kind of flat, but now it's kind of going down a little bit. That's mostly because of that motor vehicle fuel tax impact that we didn't project until COVID. So just some of those uncertainties that are hard to plan. And then stormwater, it goes down to 2020 because of that $2 million transfer that we did to the capital fund. And then it's gradually increasing even at $1 million going into the capital fund. So just something to look at. I don't know that $1 million is enough. It might be $2 million a year. So that's just something that we need to look at and plan out into the future. That's it for that. Before we go to the next slide, or okay, she's gonna go for it. Okay, so I just want to say before we talk about this that estimates are changing. Okay, so this looks a little different than probably what we have been looking at in the past. The previous forecast, the green line was out more like 2026, let's say, right in there. Looking at the budget, looking out in the future, our previous forecast, we had 2021 at, let's think 3.6 million in sales tax. Because I had reduced that in 2021, I have updated the forecast to say that we are projecting right now a little bit less sales tax. And if you compound that over 7 years, it ended up being about a $2 million reduction to sales tax. So it's just one of those things that I put in the forecast because that's what we're looking at now, and we might be modifying it. So it makes a big impact if we are flat in 2021. If we don't have a big increase in 2021 and that continues, that's what will happen. The other impact, the largest impact, was the permit revenue reduction. I reduced that by 400,000 and I continue that reduction out into the future. That impact to the forecast was about 1.3 million. So those two changes to the forecast looking out into the future is what you're looking at now in front of your screen. So, but as a baseline, based on the information I have right now, this is what the fund balance, both of general fund and the reserve fund, the green line, this is what it would look like. I think we've been talking too about maybe getting rid of the orange line, which is the general fund by itself. At this point, we need the reserve fund in the general fund. So we're getting to that point where we'll probably just show the general fund and the reserve fund together at all times. But just want to say that we are working on the budget. We're still changing numbers in the background. If I get a couple months of sales tax that gives me a different indication, we'll change the 2020 estimated and we'll be changing the forecast and 2021 initial budget. So.
Yeah, Josh, can I jump in here real quick?
Yeah, that's fine.
One of the things, Council, that we've talked about over and over is the TBD. We've put it in place, but we haven't funded it yet. And if we're able to fund the Transportation Benefit District, it really changes this forecast dramatically because we subsidize our street fund right from general fund every year. And that adds to this accumulation of spending. So if we could fund that in the next year or two at the latest, would be my proposal. It changes this dramatically. What are we subsidizing the streets out of general right now, Josh?
Well, the property tax allocation is 1.5 million. 1.45 million.
Yeah, and the majority of the cities, as we've talked, already are funding their TBDs, and to be able to reach the goals that we've set in increasing police officers and increasing park staff and being able to maintain the facilities that we have, we've got to fix this structural deficit, and that is a huge step in the right direction if we can fund our TBD.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we project only $800,000 for the TBD? If we went with the sales tax model?
I think that's pretty close. It was on a sales tax on a 1/10, it was 400 or 450 per 1/10. So that would be like a 2/10 scenario. But we haven't, I would say we haven't done, I haven't looked at it for a while, but that's what the numbers were. If you, just in the forecasting scenario, if you add $800,000 a year, that does make a large impact. I mean, that's a big impact. The other thing to note is there's no annexation assumptions in here on the revenue or expenditure side, and there's no big development like Costco. That those things are not in the forecast.
Costco should make a significant change to this as well. I mean, what's the revenue forecast on a Costco?
The last forecast we had was 600,000 in sales tax.
And then we're also adding Ross to
Those
this
are
equation.
Yeah, those are built in a little bit. I have some placeholders for those little businesses, and they add a little bit, but not as much as like a Costco. Yeah, gotcha. But you're right. As things come in, it'll change a little bit. But there are some big things out there that are not included.
The other option for generating revenue is obviously utility tax on sewer. The city is elected to hold off on that. That could be implemented and would increase our general fund if that was implemented.
Was the sales tax off of building a Costco added into this model?
No. And I did talk about that with Gene. So the construction sales tax I have in there is just kind of what we think baseline. So anything extra would go into the contingency fund. And it would be a big number, yes.
Yeah. What about the Highway 9-204, the sales tax that would be generated there?
We're not including it.
Okay. So there's still some big projects out there that'll help lend it to moving these lines.
The only caveat I have there is that we, as much as we can, we want to fix a structural deficit with continuing revenue sources. And so those one-time ones are, we'd rather save those for capital projects.
Right, but we're looking at pushing these lines further out. That's
they would push them out. We would just use them for operating costs instead. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we'll move to the next slide, and you guys can think if you have any more questions. The next slide is just click 4 times, I think, Kelly. Let's get them all up there. Just talking to Brett before he became a father. These are just kind of the budget priorities we have, kind of looking forward from the mayor and the city here. So just continue revitalizing downtown. We're going to be talking about that today. Park and Recreation Division, we've already talked about that a little bit. Obviously keeping public safety at a high level, continuing to look at infrastructure and encouraging economic development. That's big, especially looking out for revenues. And then what Gene was saying is looking at a TBD to help with operating capital of the street fund and help the general fund from subsidizing that fund. So these are just some priorities, and today hopefully we'll get council priorities as well. Any questions? It's kind of a lot of info, but
I just want to thank you, Josh. You've stepped up with Barb not able to be here, and you've done a tremendous job. And this really just speaks to the team that Lake Stevens has built. If one of us can't be there, somebody else steps up and fills those shoes. So thank you for your work.
That's exactly what I was going to say too, Josh. Thank you so much.
And my goal here is to not be too conservative and not be too aggressive on the spending. So we're trying to be, not be too doom and gloom. So, but just saying that the next couple months, we're going to be, these numbers will change. I mean, maybe not drastically, but they're like Tadget's saying, there are some things out there that we might not be able to forecast right now, but they're out there, they're on the horizon, and they should keep those things in your mind. But just from a forecasting standpoint, we don't want to include too much until we know.
Great, thank you. Are we moving on to the next agenda item? Yes.
Sure, if council's ready.
So we're going to go to the UGA expansion. That would be Russ.
Okay, let me go to the point in the packet here. Okay, so starting on page 79 of the packet that you have, it puts together a few items for the council's consideration as it relates to UGA expansion. So the first page is just a cover memo by staff that lays out what an urban growth area is. Quick recap, those are the areas outside of the city limits that are eligible for annexation and have been designated by Snohomish County for residential or commercial growths. After annexations, obviously those come into the city's fold, and the city has the police power. Altogether, though, the city and its unincorporated areas are the areas designated for the growth targets over a 20-year planning horizon. So we're at the point with Snohomish County's docketing that they're preparing their major docket, which allows cities to make requests for UGA expansions. This has been a topic that the City Council has actually been considering off and on for probably the last decade. And obviously right now is our opportunity to make an application if we would like to make any changes. So earlier this month, I've met with the mayor a couple of times on his desire to do this. The city administrator and a couple of council members also were present. So at this point, we've identified 4 primary areas of interest for a UGA expansion. Area 1 is at the top of this map, which would be the blue area. That would be an industrial expansion north of Highway 92. Area number 2 is a small area that was identified as we're going through this Machias industrial annexation. There were 2 parcels, thank you, left out of the unincorporated area that don't go up to a natural boundary, which is 28. So talked to the owner of that property, who's also one of the signers of the petition, and said, hey, can you at least consider this as you make any applications to the county and maybe a partnership with that private owner. Area 3 is the Sunnyside area. Originally, staff had suggested bringing in an isolated neighborhood that you fully have to go through Lake Stevens streets as service, sewer service, but is currently an unincorporated island. Councilmember Peter Shagan suggested, and long-term, I think it makes a tremendous amount of sense, taking our boundary up to Soper Hill, which would border Marysville on the north, as it already does, and then on the west down to Sunnyside Boulevard. And that's a nice clean break from the floodplain of EB Slough on the south of that, and would be available for some additional residential development. The area to the south, area number 4, that's something that the council has been talking on and off about, like I say, for at least a decade, where it's expanding our commercial presence or potentially setting up areas for business parks to the south of the city limits. At this point, not proposing to go as far as Highway 2, but that has definitely been discussed in the past, and this would give us additional areas for economic growth. With that said, I I want to be honest with council. This would be an incredibly heavy lift for the city. This is an extremely aggressive and large proposal. We have talked about bringing on a consultant to prepare our applications. We've worked with LDC in the past, particularly Clay White, as he used to be the Director of Planning and Development Services for Snohomish County. That group prepared the buildable land survey for the city over the past couple of years, the update. And so it made sense that we bring that group on to help us, at least with our application proposal, getting it in the door. And more or less, these areas would act as a placeholder. It's likely if they were docketed, we would be looking at probably reductions in the scale and scope of these properties. But again, for a placeholder, council members have definitely suggested they'd like to be aggressive and go in with as large of areas as we can. Some of the things that the staff is going to have to be able to justify goes to the buildable lands. So through the Puget Sound Regional Council process, the Vision 2050, that group sets regional growth targets. The current paradigm that they're working under shifts growth targets to areas with mass transit highway corridors, areas like Highway 99 that are going to get light rail between Linwood and Everett, Mount Lake Terrace, and some other bus spines. So that is one philosophy that's out there, and that is where the buildable land survey will also be looking. Buildable lands update, the official one will be done in mid-2021. So until those numbers are published, it's going to be really hard to be proactive and really make a good, strong case. So where we're at today, as the city participates in Snohomish County tomorrow, we can make suggestions on how the countywide planning policies are adopted, specifically as they address UGA expansion. In the past, well, as long as I've been a professional planner, it has been a super hard chore to get the county to budge on these UGA boundaries. I've not seen one that was successful, but I think if we can tell a good, strong story, if you all work with your colleagues on the Snohomish County Council and coalitions with other cities, that would be a step in the right direction. And again, staff's role in this is going to be working with the countywide planning policies to make sure that satellite cities like Stevens, like Monroe, are able to get the point across that we are not going to have these high capacity transit corridors, and it's a quality of life that a lot of people want to choose to live and recreate in cities like Stevens. One thing that we do need to look at, and I've identified, we do have a commercial deficiency. Even though we've done all of our sub-area plannings, we've done our zoning, just with some of the encumbrances we have, including critical areas, including the Everett water line, that takes a substantial amount of commercial areas out of production. So that is a good argument that is consistent with the methodology the county would be looking at. So anyway, the mayor asked that we bring this forward, share it with the entire council. Like I say, a couple of council members have had an opportunity to look at this and make some comments. And so just wanted to get feedback from the rest of the council. Obviously, there's a financial impact this year to get the applications in. We'd be looking at between $6,000 and $7,000, an equivalent amount in a year or so to modify the applications. And then the environmental review, should they be docketed, minimum $100,000, could be upwards of $200,000, $250,000.
Rusk, I think you said this at the beginning. When would the application process need to start, and when are the applications due?
So the applications are due for the placeholders by the end of October. And then just recently, the county council has agreed to, at least the planning and development services, have held off an additional 6 months to make their docketing recommendations. So that would occur in 22 for these applications. And that's going to be based on being able to look at the new buildable lands data and see what these revised growth targets look like. So we're still talking 18 months out before we would even know if any application would be docketed and move forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
I will add, and as it notes in the memo here, both Councilmember Tagent and myself did meet with the mayor and Community Development Director Wright in our capacities as Council President and Vice President to discuss this. And the feeling for including this, as Russ indicated, was try to push the bar out as far as possible in hopes that we may actually get something. I think we all recognize it's a very difficult process to expand urban growth boundaries. But again, the feeling is if we don't ask, we'll never get there. So the areas that were added were added based on the premise that they're serviceable. These aren't pie in the sky, just land grabs. Area 3 in particular, there is a sewer trunk line that serves that area and can be easily expanded along Sunnyside Boulevard. Area 1 also has service available to it. There would be some, in the northern part of that, there would be some pumping required because of topography, but those are serviceable areas. And also Area 4 is a serviceable area from sewer standpoint. So these aren't areas that were lightly considered from a utility standpoint. It's I think more of a general knowledge of the area as to how they can be served, and so that's why they were, I guess, promoted or selected for potential areas of increase in our UGA. So with that, just we do have a little bit of a crunch time. I think, Russ, the deadline is October 20th, if I'm not correct. So we're about 3 weeks out. So we do need to kind of say yay or nay and kind of get the process moving. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions. If Councilmember Tagent has anything to add, certainly do so. And so
I think one of the biggest things is Lake Stevens has been a champ at taking growth in the city, doing everything that we're supposed to do. The other portion of that is our buildable lands report, which I think Councilmember Petershagen has brought up several times. That's a really important document coming up for us, getting that buildable lands report and making sure we're accurate and looking at how little amount of commercial we have in developable land that doesn't have, I mean, the most of the land that's left in the city has got challenges, significant challenges with it. So documenting that report well and getting a good solid report in front of the hands of our county council and then helping them understand our needs is going to be important for all of us to make sure that we're chatting with county council members and so forth.
I appreciate this information, and council members Petershagen and Tagent, thank you for your involvement and pushing this forward and for the extra information. I think this is aggressive, but it feels very thoughtfully aggressive. I think that we're not going to see a decrease in growth. We're not going to get smaller, and it feels like we need to get out in front of this and move forward in this direction. So I'm, given this information, I'm fully supportive of submitting that application and moving forward.
I just want to say that, yeah, like exactly what Angie said. Thank you for being a part of that, Marcus and Gary. So I live off of Soper Hill, and I drove around down there, and it would be a very interesting change for us. I think one of the biggest challenges Lake Stevens has is we don't have a lot of flat land. Everything's on a steep hill. And even though Area 3 would still be on a slope for sure, but at least Area 1 has more potential, I think, for growth. And I actually have spoken to people that live out there, and they have their fingers crossed that maybe we will consider annexing them. So I understand the topography is not our friend, And I can understand why we'd want to do this. Thank you for taking the time to look into this.
So having said that, I'm going to jump in here. It sounds like as we do have support for this, so I would suggest that we have this on our next council meeting for, we have to pass a resolution or just guidance or something of that regard.
I think passing a resolution would be appropriate due to the seriousness of this request and the complexity. So yeah, we'll prepare a resolution. In the meantime, I've heard general support, and we do have money already set aside in the budget to start the contract process and to placeholder, so we can start the application process before council's formal action. But I think that that would be a good thing to pass a resolution in support of the UGA application.
Great.
I think get after it as fast as you can, Russ, especially with that timeline. I think I saw enough thumbs ups that you can feel confident moving forward, and I'll make sure it's on the next agenda.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so that finishes that topic. How about the downtown plan, Russ? Or excuse me, I don't think it's Russ, is it?
Well, I'm actually going to take the first part of it. So Kelly, if you can queue up the slideshow would be great.
I'd be happy to. Hold on. Are we seeing it? Okay. Everybody see it?
Great.
Yep. Okay.
So as council is well aware, you'd adopted the downtown plan in 2018. For the benefit of the newer council members, I did want to run through some of the primary goals of that plan and how we've been moving along towards the implementation. Hand it off to Gene in a little while. He'll talk about some of the future phases, and then we'll talk about some of the funding options. Do I have control, Kelly, or are you still on controlling it?
I think that I do.
Okay, that's fine. Just go ahead and slide down.
Okay.
Okay, so this slide just gives you a general overview that was developed with the sub-area plan. Main Street runs smack through the middle of it. You can see the prior concept for the expansion of North Cove Park. It's really kept all of the features. The final build out's a little different.
No, my fault. Apologize.
No, that's fine. The final build out was a little bit different. And then opposite of North Cove Park, you see the new retail blocks that we'll be talking about in the build out of 18th. Okay. This slide shows what were the big concepts developed for that downtown plan. One, the expansion of North Cove Park with preservation of a view corridor. Even though we've built the mill, you see the general location on this slide that showed a pavilion. That's about where we did build the mill from up top the parking lot. There will be views. In fact, with phase 2, we're building a viewing platform. And then with the construction of phase 2, there would be a second view corridor along 18th. You see the expansion of the road grid. We've done phase 1 of that. And then the regional attractor has been built. That would be the mill. And we're going to be working on public parking. Go ahead. So this slide really just shows us what's been done to date. So these were the big items identified by the community that they wanted to see constructed. The expansion of North Cove Park. Well, it's done. Phase 2 is starting, so we've done great on that. Main Street improvements, we've completed phase 1. Community facilities, as I already mentioned, the mill has been built. Main Street retail, that would be part of the phase 2 with the extension of Millspur Road. Also being able to build some public parking, both with the expansion of the park and with the phase 2. City Hall, you all know that we're working on the civic campus and moving forward on that. And then additional road connections will be a future action, and we'll be talking about those later in the slides. So these drawings just show you some of the alignments for future connections. What you see here would be the areas north of 20th Street where there will be connections to Machias, Hartford, Grade Road. Go ahead.
Sorry, Russ, it's just being a little slow. There you go.
Okay, Gene, you want to jump in?
Thank you, Russ.
Hey, Gene, sorry, before you do, Troy, can I get you to help me? You just sent me a message about how I can give control to Gene.
Yeah, it's up on your screen where Zoom options are at. You should be able to go in there and say and grant control to one of the participants so they can navigate through the slides. On the top of your navigation from Zoom, or whoever is currently in should be able to request remote control. They can navigate through the slides.
Okay.
Just on your view options, anyone can just request control. You can grant it. They can move through the slides, highlight areas.
Okay.
You might be able to do
so
it for me, Kelly, if it's too much.
Okay, I see.
Okay, Gene, I didn't know if you want a cursor control to point stuff out, but.
That's okay. I'll direct you.
Okay. So, are we here?
Thank you. We've had some discussion about this intersection at Main and 20th Northeast and how we can best control that intersection, improve movements. And so we hired HDR, a consultant company, to help us put together a rendering of what could be done in this location. What you see here is an oval roundabout. This came about after several iterations of using an actual roundabout, and it just didn't fit. You've got the bridge abutment on the east side. You've got obviously the chicken on the west side. And then we didn't want to impact the commercial property to the northwest. And we knew we'd impact it some, but the least impact would be the better for that commercial build out. So what we've come up with is a pretty good solution to that intersection that provides really pretty decent traffic movement through there. Even smaller semis can make it through that turn. They will have to go over the roundabout a bit, but it would be a drivable roundabout. So when we have our parades and the like, it is drivable. So you'd be able to go over the top of it, much like the roundabout at Soper Hill that was installed. What this design does for you is it continues the 10-foot walking path along the west side. It does miss the chicken. And you can see how far the road is shifted to the north. So the city would have the ability to consider vacating that portion of the right of way just to the north of the chicken so that business could expand, or the stacking for the drive-through could be addressed. You've seen at a lot of the new McDonald's across the nation, they've gone to a stackable drive-through, and that could potentially be accommodated here to deal with the backup out on the street that we currently have for that drive-through. So,
hey, Gene, sorry to interrupt. I think you do have control with your mouse now, if you want to give it a try.
Can you see my mouse?
There's a cursor in the middle of the screen.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Okay, it does say it's waiting for you to take control, so, okay.
Okay, well, if I'm confusing people, I can stop. The other thing that we've shown is the walking path along the coffee stand lot there that shows a 10-foot path. And what we discussed is, we could always reduce that in this area to an 8-footer to provide more commercial property, but a retaining wall does need to be built in there. And then we talked about stopping that pedestrian path right where the crosswalk is on the north side of the roundabout, cut back over to Hartford where the existing trail section is, and that would provide additional usable space for commercial development on the coffee stand lot. One last thing that we talked about is stormwater. Obviously, we have to deal with stormwater on this, and so that pie-shaped area where Hartford Road is, that could be used for stormwater. And we did pose the question of if that area is big enough to create kind of a regional pond where it could hold some of the water from future development on the coffee stand lot. We want to plan that and think about that of how we can best use this particular location. In addition, you'll see that Hartford comes in at a T intersection there to the north, and that really fixes that up. So open for questions.
I want to say something about the Soper Hill roundabout, because I live that way and I see how that works, that you can drive over it. And I don't think that's really a great idea. I understand why you want to do it this way here. Well, best I can. I'm not an engineer, but I would love you to at least look at the possibility of how that could be a problem. It is a problem on Soper Hill when trucks go charging over that and up Soper Hill. People that live in that area have come to me and talked to me about how unsafe it feels to them. Just something for you to ponder, and thank you for all the effort on this design. I'm very glad to get to see it.
Mhm.
Okay, why don't you move us forward, Russ?
I think that, Mary, I want to talk about that for a second. I think that part of the problem is that people don't understand that it was designed to be done that way, that they don't understand the design. They don't understand the trucks are supposed to do that. And that's what makes them uncomfortable. So if people would just try to figure out, how the designs are and get a little bit more involved in what the design was supposed to do, I think that their comfort level will go up a little bit. But when somebody doesn't understand and sees a truck drive right across a roundabout like that, then yeah, they're going to get uncomfortable thinking, what the hell's that guy doing? That's not supposed to be that way. And it's designed that way so that the trucks can make it, because they can't actually make that turn. The other problem we have is that community transit cannot go over a raised roundabout. They're buses, so they just can't do it because of the people on the bus. It causes injuries. So that's why they have the flat roundabouts.
Kim, I would have to disagree with you a little bit on this particular roundabout. I agree with Councilmember Dickinson. I drive this route probably 2 to 3, maybe 4 times a day, and it's not unusual for someone to go straight across at 30 miles an hour. They don't make an attempt to even go around it. It's a straight shot, and the reason for that is because the roundabout is not elevated significantly enough to make an impact to their travel route. And this was designed as a, quote, mini roundabout, which in my guesstimation shouldn't have been done. The circumference of the roundabout is so small that even if you try to navigate around the travel path, you end up, if you have a reasonable sized car, you end up on the surface of the roundabout. So it's, unfortunately it's built, it is what it is, but I would agree with Mary. It has created probably more unsafe condition than if we had the pre-existing situation there. Like I say, it is not uncommon to see somebody just blow through that thing straight on. And I guess in regards to the roundabout that we're proposing at the center here, is the green area possibly a no drive zone, and the pink area is for cutting across, so that you wouldn't have that straight on ability to go straight through it?
So typically, yeah, that outside apron is the drivable surface. Some significant differences, though, that I would point out about this roundabout. You see each of the legs are much more exaggerated. That was one of the faults, not being a traffic engineer, but that's one of the issues from the Soper Hill roundabout, is the legs going in and out of it weren't as exaggerated. And you also see in this that the barriers leading into it really deflect the traffic much more than that roundabout. So I know staff is looking at the one at 83rd and trying to come to some solutions with Marysville, but there are some very different elements to this roundabout that should help with traffic control more than that other example.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. And I would not want to see the Soper Hill 83rd roundabout replicated again. It is not a good situation.
Well, I didn't realize that cars were doing that. I thought it was only the trucks that were doing that. So
No,
if cars are doing that, I think we've got a traffic problem then.
Yeah,
Traffic
it's
violation.
spend an hour up there, over by Soperwood and just watch. It is absolutely amazing the disregard for how people, if they see nobody around there, they just blow it. It's really amazing. So
And I'm going to go look at it.
yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to jump back in. So again, going back to the original downtown plan, one of the fundamental elements was to create this festival street. So this is where we're going to have Mill Spur on this part. This is just south of North Cove Park. What you see here is the expanded retail along the frontage. We'll be talking more about that. And we do have areas programmed in this for the library and potentially the row house and moving the Grimm house to a final home.
I'm sorry, did you say the library?
If I did say the library, I meant the museum.
Okay, thank you.
Good catch, Angie.
Grimm house.
I was going to ask that question too. So where, Russ, where would you imagine the Grimm house being here?
Under our current proposal, the Grimm house would sit on the corner of 18th.
Okay.
And then the potential new museum building, and if the row house would like to participate in this area, and then the remainder of that block would be available for private retail uses. And one of the things the city would be suggesting is we surplus this area, and we'll talk about that in a little while when we talk about our funding strategies.
And where is the church?
The church is over here.
Over there. Okay. All right. So they don't give up their parking lot.
They really don't have a parking lot. But
oh, excuse me. I always thought that was theirs.
With them to probably lease or work with them on some parking.
Okay.
Yeah, the only actual parking or property they own is right behind in the little area behind it they have fenced out. The rest of it belongs to the city.
And a little bit in the frontage, but that's something we'll have to work on when we do the expansion. Okay, this is the overall site plan for North Cove Park. As you can see, it's evolved a little bit, but all of the key aspects are maintained. The pathway around the perimeter of the park, the stage, adding in the play area, and some additional parking. This graphic also shows out the build out of the final phase of the park, which adds this community festival plaza area. That'll be one of the other view corridors. And of course, the Veterans Memorial sits in this location. Parking will be added along Mill Spur to support the mill and the other side of the park. Along with ADA, there'll be on-street parking on this side that would support the retail establishments. Again, this is just a close-up of the Mill Spur layout. Again, does include parking, on-street parking, stormwater, and plantings. Gene, do you want to talk about this part?
Certainly. This is the gateway to Mill Spur. It's really dramatic, and we continue to work with the engineer to finalize the designs on this. But what you see here is a real close representation of what will be built out there. Those posts are dramatic. They're 8x8s, and there's 4 of them grouped together with steel banding, and the actual sign is designed to look like a railroad track. And you have real stone bases. So we're not planning on using artificial stone. We're planning on using real stone to replicate what would have been used years ago. And then the gate detail you see down at the bottom, we're still working that out. Again, natural stone bases, and those would be able to be shut down at a moment's notice so that the street could be used for a festival. And our hope is to be able to do that weekly, if at all possible, to have as many events down there as possible, including expanding the farmers market.
Oh, these are some options we've been working through to do a boundary line adjustment. So there are various city-owned properties down there, and our end goal would be down in this slide where you see the overlay of the new mill spur, where it's taking the return down towards the boat launch. As asked earlier, where would the Grimm House sit? The Grimm House would be on this orange parcel. This would be a pad dedicated for the Historical Society for the relocation of their museum, potentially a location for the boathouse, and the remainder of this area shown in pink would be proposed for surplus for retail spaces in the downtown area. And we'll run through some slides on what that might look like. Any questions before moving on?
Hey, Russ, I just want to point out, can you use your cursor and show where we're proposing to slide the existing boathouse?
Yeah.
That'd be helpful.
So right now, there's a proposal. This is this outline here. We could potentially slide the existing boat house into that location. It would require some coordination with the Department of Fish and Wildlife if we were going to do that, but that would be a temporary measure.
Russ, under this scenario, does the I'll refer to it as the brown house that we acquired, does that go away? It appears
Yes.
it does. Okay.
The brown house would be in this area. It would be the city's intent to put that property up for sale as part of a surplus package that we would bring to council. Keep the property, sell the house.
Oh, okay. For somebody to move off site.
Yes.
Okay, great.
All right, Gene, do you want to pick up again?
Certainly, Russ. The engineering estimate right now is 2.2 million to construct mill spur. We're looking at grant opportunities for that. The museum and row club, we're estimating at $1 million. And that $1 million, what that consists of is basically a shell of a building. It would be 2-story, and it would be separated down the middle with what I would describe as a condominium wall. So one side could be the boathouse, and the other side would be the museum. There would be a bathroom that would be in the middle somewhere that both sides of the building could use. Each would have its own entrance in the front and storefront, if you will. And there would be a roll-up door in the back for the boathouse and some sort of door for the museum. That's kind of what we're looking at right now. We've estimated the relocation of the Grimm House to be around $70,000. That every lot per code, we've got to have utilities run to. So you're looking at water, sewer, and power going to that lot. And so that's why that cost is what it is. The build out of the interior of the museum and boathouse would be done by the user groups that move in there. Our goal is just to get the shell put up and at least get them a home. So the other thing that's going on that front is I appreciate Mary's help. She's met with the museum and the Historical Society folks, if you will, with me. We're looking at a moving plan. We've been looking at the old fire station to house the artifacts in the interim period before the new building's built. And we have met with the Row Club as well. And they're interested in participating in what the city has to offer here, but they're also interested in potentially the house that the city just purchased next to the boat launch as a potential location for them. Logistically, trying to move boats in and out that are 50, 60 feet long is a bit of problematic out on the mill spur or out the back. And so that's the conversation we're having currently.
Whoops. So the next thing we've done is developed a number of funding options, and we'll probably be jumping back and forth as we talk about those, but all of them look at doing some surplusing of city properties to, be able to construct Mill Spur, the museum. So one of the things we already talked about is selling that parcel C. That was the pink area for mixed use or residential retail use downtown. Also looking at surplusing the subway building attached to the current police station site on South Lake Stevens Road. That's one funding option that's being proposed. Another option is bringing in a partner that the city could work with to develop some sort of a public-private partnership who would take on the responsibility and financial costs of building that out. Again, the city might need to provide additional funds through surplus of property. And then the third option is obviously the city can issue bonds. The big issue there is we don't have a defined funding mechanism to repay the bonds at this point. Gene, anything you want to add on those?
No, other than we'll be bringing this back to you shortly to, move forward some decisions. If we decide to sell we're calling it the subway building over by the police station, that would need to be surplused by the city council. Once that happens, then we could put that up for sale. We are actively getting an appraisal on that property, along with all the properties along Main Street, including parcel C and a few others down by where the proposed roundabout would be, just so we know what all these costs are. So we'll be laying this out in probably the next month for council to look at and make some decisions. We'd like to keep the momentum in downtown. We've seen the result of all of our work here in North Cove with families gathering all summer long. It's been really exciting, and this is the next step. And I'm a big believer of keeping the momentum going, because if you slow down, it's easy to get distracted, and downtown is such an important element to the city, and we've made big strides. So my proposal is to keep moving forward, and if we can accomplish this particular goal, that'll be huge. So that'll be coming before you next 45 days at most.
And then moving on, we'll talk about the timeline. That's a great segue.
Can I ask one really quick question? I seem to remember at a council meeting earlier this year, when we were talking about wanting to align the leases of the businesses in that subway building, there was a conversation, I think, about the potential for using that building for future police department expansion. Am I remembering that correctly? And is that now off the table?
You're correct, Angie, and we have talked to the chief about it, and it's still the department's desire to hold on to that for future expansion. The not concerns, but the points that we've looked at, being the mayor and I, is that right now it's a commercial center generating revenue, and if it's turned into a public building, there's no revenue generated by it. And there is adjacent properties to the existing police station that could be looked at for future purchasing to expand that facility. And so that's what we're keeping in the back of our mind.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so Gene has laid out a timeline that basically where we're at today is we're meeting with the stakeholders. As mentioned, we've had continuing conversations with the Historical Society. You all know we're actively working with the Snow Isle Library District on a temporary home and a permanent home. Sort of talked about the funding options. So there are some real-time decisions that we'll be looking for council to make over the next few weeks. The big target goals are next year, around May of next year. That's when we would need the library and museum to relocate, go into potentially temporary homes, start the demolition, and then moving into construction over June of next year to the spring of the following year. And then that would complete the next phase of the downtown renovation. Beyond that, the roundabout and the extension of Main Street, we're looking at some grant funding opportunities for those. And correct me, Eric, but that's looking like 23 is when those would be eligible for those funds. Okay. Any comments or questions for Gene or myself over the projection of the downtown build out?
Just one question as I'm thinking here. Since we are doing downtown revitalization, I guess, but in essence, this is a park. Can any park mitigation funds be used for this purpose?
The plaza area attached to the mill would be paid for with park dollars.
So is that in addition to the 2.2 million, or is that part of the 2.2 million?
That's part of the 2.2 million. I don't have the specific breakout, but we would be looking at street dollars, park dollars, and obviously we're looking for a grant. That'll be one of our asks of the legislature, is to help fund that as well. So yeah, looking at lots of buckets of money.
So
we can't.
Potentially with the scale of these other surplus properties, we may be able to fund this thing.
Yes.
So it's not a pie in the sky deal.
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So the museum and the Grimm House are not a part of our park system?
They are not.
Is there a way we could make them a part of the park system?
Potentially, that's something I can talk to Gene about and maybe Greg about. They are identified in our park plan, I will say that, as special features in the community, but we don't manage the historical society. We do own the facility, and we have identified both of those facilities in our park plan.
It
I'm
seems
not
to
sure
me
that I
that,
want to mix those two together, to be honest.
really?
Yeah, no, because the museum should be funding themselves.
Well, I'm only talking about getting them built. I'm not talking about ongoing costs of doing business as part of the parks. Part of the parks plan, our plan, and being able to use some of those parks mitigation fees to set this up might be something that we want to look into. It's just an idea. I'm not, I certainly don't want to say that, yeah, we're going to, part of our park program is going to be the ongoing expenses of the museum or the Grimm House, but getting them put into place where we want to do it, I'm thinking that maybe that's not a bad idea.
I think it is a good idea, actually, Kim. And there's no question that the museum and the Grimm House being facing out to the plaza area will enhance the experience for anybody that's there. It could be positive in both directions. So I like that idea very much.
I just want to not take it off the table totally and have it looked at, but we've got another thing coming up here for our parks. So, we've got a lot of things we're trying to do at parks. So it might not be the right thing to do, but just because of money. So continue on in our day and we'll see where we're at.
One of the attractive things about doing a P3 on this particular project is in the downtown area, we are allowed to go 3 stories in this location. So one thing that we could look into is go 3 stories on that building that would house the museum and the boathouse. And you could do residential on the very top story to gain revenue to help construct that building. But again, it would have to be a P3. We would, keep the bottom 2 stories and the top could be developed out. So there's still a lot of road to cross there, and we're looking at every option to make this viable. But I appreciate your question, Councilmember Peterson, because it is affordable, it is achievable if we get the dominoes tipping in the right direction.
So Gene, this part of this discussion, is this the total downtown plan that would take us to 130? Is this, did we do this all by 12 o'clock, what we have agendaed for 1?
That's correct.
So we're obviously ahead of schedule. Do you guys just want to try to run to the finish line here? Do you guys want to take a break? What do you guys want to do?
5-minute break.
Yeah, if we could just do like a 5 or 10 minute break, I'd be ready to continue and finish if that works for everyone.
Great. I think 5-10 minutes would be great. Was there any more on the downtown plan before we take a 10-minute break?
I just want to say I'm really interested in the idea of the housing option. Would love to, maybe not today, but sort of dive more into the pros and cons of moving in that direction. So thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, really quickly, I'll just respond to that. Part of the strategy we've talked about is that we would enter into a development agreement with whoever purchases that. So that will give council a lot of discretion to help dictate what you would like to see in a development down there, obviously within a range, but we will be recommending as a condition of purchase and sale, there's a development agreement with the city so we get what we want down there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, we're right up against 12 o'clock. So if we want to take a 10-minute break, we can just leave this open and then jump back in at around 12:10.
Perfect.
Does that work for everybody?
Sounds great.
Great.
Yeah,
So
I'll go ahead and pause the recording, but we'll probably still be live streaming on YouTube, just so you guys know.
okay.
Thanks.
See you guys in 10.
That'd be fun to go see. Visit.
Russ, you shouldn't have any problem sharing. Next.
Okay. Do I have?
Given you permission.
Okay.
I hold all the power. I love it.
Amazing.
Power hungry, huh?
Okay, does everybody see the slideshow?
Yep. Oh, no, not yet.
Okay.
I was gonna say, what slideshow do you see, Cam?
One on the other computer I've been watching, maintaining so I can actually read it.
Hey, Marcus, give me a heads up when we're back on so I can turn the recording back on.
Do I got everyone back? Who are we missing?
Oh, there's Steve.
There's Steve.
Okay, I think we're good.
I think we're good too. Let's jump back into the workshop.
All right, great, we're on.
So we're on the West Side Power Line Trail.
Yes. Can everybody see my screen with the slideshow on it?
No. You should have permission. Oh, I think it's coming up now. Nope, yeah, I see it.
Got it now.
Okay, everybody sees that now?
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. So as we've been talking about for the last few months, the city went through the trail master plan that council had adopted that laid out a trail corridor throughout the city. One of the big priorities was a north-south trail under the utility lines. Also looking for areas to expand different parks in the west side of the city, specifically down near the ball fields. We acquired additional properties last year that's potentially going to site a dog park. It has our play fields, etc. We're just going to walk through what some of the next steps of this could look like. So the next step we'd like to do is phase 1, and that includes master planning out the ball fields itself and the dog park area. That's down in the lower part of the park, and then going from about 20th Street to 8th Street, build the first section of that power line trail. Some of the tasks in front of us are acquisition of properties and or rights-of-way easements, and talk a little bit more about that as we move along. So up to this point, we've had significant public outreach for this, one through the master trail plan that went out community-wide. We've also had some targeted outreach going door to door with the residents of some of these various neighborhoods. We've sent out mailers, and this last week we had Zoom meetings for some of the affected groups. Some of the issues that we heard about specifically near the Quail Court development is what is the impact going to be on local roads, specifically 88th, where people already try to use that as a cut through, and they have some on-street parking issues, etc. Some of these things we can deal with pretty quickly through some additional signage. Some might need a bit more attention, such as some traffic calming devices. But one of the other big concerns as it relates to the build out of the park to all of the neighborhoods in this area is how are they going to maintain security and privacy from intensified uses and obviously their residential uses. So we've come up with a few development options that we can share with the neighborhood. That's one of the things they wanted to see. What are some concepts? And this will also help council sort of focus on what your strategy is going to be when we look at acquisition of properties or rights of way. So option 1 is what we're going to call the full build out option. So down at the south part of the site, just off of 20th Street, you would have a dog park area, what you call a shy dog area, where you might have older dogs or something like that that you might want to separate from more intensive dog park areas. It maintains the practice fields. It includes an area for picnic, playground, a more active dog park area, the hard trail, which would be the multi-use path, and then maintain the existing soft trail that goes through the wetland area of the park and provide increased parking next to the Quail Court neighborhood and screening on all sides where there are residential neighborhoods. So that's kind of option one. Option two also looks at the acquisition of the Quail Court neighborhood, all of the features that we talked about with some different locations. The biggest difference is this would provide a parking lot for community transit to be able to access the HOV lane, the BAT lane that's under construction right now, and get some commuters off of the roads and give some relief to the other transit center up by Target. Option three, we would leave out acquisition of the Quail Court neighborhood. And so it's just more of a compact park design. It shifts the additional parking to the area that might have been used by community transit, and then pushes the shy dog area and the active dog area into the same sort of footprint, and moves where the playground and picnic area would be. Again, all of the same features, just in a potentially more compact design. Not to say that any of these three options are final, but trying to lay out some big decision points. And obviously option three could be modified further to also include area for community transit. So before we move on with some acquisition strategies, just wanted to get council's input on some of these different park build out options.
One quick question. These options all involve dog parks. Does that mean the current dog park at Caballero would be repurposed for a different use, or would we then have 2 dog parks along that corridor?
The city's ultimate goal would be to see the dog park at Caballero go away because that site is better suited for more active uses. And this site, especially this northern half, is better situated for these more passive uses. Obviously, that would require some more coordination with Snohomish County, but we've been upfront with them that that would be the city's goal by putting in a dog park here.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other
in the discussions with community transit, would it be that community transit is actually purchasing that parking pad from us, or what?
Gene, do you want to field that one?
Absolutely. As council knows, we've done some environmental studies over at the existing community transit lot just south of Frontier Village in the new Village Way road that we built. And they're open to letting the city work with them, develop that existing site by Frontier Village into some retail. The concern is losing existing parking, but they did mention if we could replace that parking in a different location, then they would be open to discussions. And so that's why we've looked at this particular area along 20th. It's a current route. And in our discussions with community transit, they felt that that would be a reasonable solution if we had lost parking up at Frontier Village and replaced that parking here. So that's what we've been looking at so far. Again, it's just one option of many.
Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts from council on these 3 options?
I would, excuse me, I would encourage that we don't diminish community transit's parking ability. If anything, it needs to be increased. So anything that takes place off market, I would hope that we would preserve that because it is a centralized location. As we all know, it's adjacent to many services and so forth, but I would support trying to get some sort of community transit location at this area. Again, just from a standpoint, it's along a major corridor there, 20th Street, and also adjacent to recreational activities. So my 2 cents.
Great.
Well, that whole 20th Street is supposedly our commercial corridor. So having transit out that way and providing more opportunities for people to carpool out of there and do other things, I think that's all very well said, and it's important. So.
Great.
So
Russ,
Russ,
So,
on the
Russ,
north-
Russ, you've done a lot of reach out to the community there, and what was their feedback? What feedback did you get from Quail Hill? Is it
Quail Court? And
Quail Court?
some of the earlier slides, let me go back. The issues, those are really the big things that we heard from that group.
Okay.
They had really big traffic concerns, and that was for their neighborhood specifically. They didn't necessarily oppose the development of the park there, but if it was developed, they wanted the city to come back with alternate parking areas, which we already do have one. It just needs to be completed. And how do we ensure that there's privacy and security for them? So those were the real big issues we heard from the people that were there. Marcus, do you want to add anything? You were in on that.
Yeah, I wasn't on those calls. There was probably 6 to 7 people pretty outspoken about traffic congestion in there. I think what they didn't quite understand, and hopefully we can help them understand, is that the parking isn't going to be such an issue once we establish that there's parking lines for people to park. I think everyone's been like, do I park there? Do I not park there? So once we make it more obvious, that would definitely go a long way in helping curb concerns moving forward, Mary.
Thank you.
2 is just the thought of having people perhaps spending time out there longer than appropriate. You know, people who are maybe squatting or whatever out in back in these areas, and just having the dogs, making sure they're on leashes and stuff along those lines. They kind of thrown that out there that was a concern too.
Yep.
It sounds though, given all the conversation that's been had around the topic, that option 2 kind of presents a nice balance between continuing development, looking for opportunities for increased parking along major corridors, and kind of addressing some of the traffic concerns. So I think that there's probably some good options there, particularly with that design model.
I agree with that. I do have a question though. On the north side, you have a trailhead in there, and this is all part of phase 1, I assume.
Yes.
The properties that are in between the 2 areas, what's the plan in there? Obviously, it's a phase 2 or phase 3 or whatever, but what's the story there?
Well,
there is no connection between the trailhead in the north and the rest of the area in the south.
Right, and we'll get to that in a minute. So that would still be part of phase 1. We just have a less clear path at this point towards what the acquisition looks like and the alignment, trying to work with Frontier Manor specifically. They have an RV parking area back there. And then they want to make sure that they have continued ability to use that effectively. So we're still trying to work with them on what a preferred alignment might look like. That's why it's not shown here.
Okay.
Excuse me. And the trailhead is shown, and that is an unopened right-of-way that the city already has. So it would really be, again, looking at what are the best options up there. The next thing we need to also do, we have the critical areas inventoried for the southern part. So we need to understand what the critical areas look like in this northern part also as we propose alignments. There's a potential stream crossing. And so really looking for some of those, the most feasible routes. Angie, I think you had a question a minute ago. Okay. So now talking about acquisition. So that's sort of one of the big first pieces. The city has reached out to the Quail Court community, specifically asking them if they would be open to selling this open space tract that was created with their subdivision. From the city's perspective, the benefit is that's where the established maintenance road is. That's where people have historically accessed this trail corridor. It's already there. So we think that that would be really good to include that parcel into the park just as a natural continuation and existing use. Obviously, the downside to that, it is a property acquisition cost, but long-term, it fits into the design and allows the most flexibility, as you've seen in the design of that park. Frontier Manor, we just talked about that a little bit. They do have a storage area in the middle of the park. The current alignment does go down the center of their parcel. They've indicated that if we continue this trail, maybe we push it as far west as possible. Might be some critical area constraints there. So that's why I left out an alignment for this for right now. That's something we need to refine and understand a little bit better. And then the same situation really occurs on the properties a little further north between 12th and 8th. It's also an open space tract that's part of the Willowwood community. In this area, though, there's not really a specific park purpose that's needed other than the trail alignment. So we would be looking at more just getting easements over top of the existing utility right of way rather than looking at actual property acquisition in these areas. And that really lays out the acquisition strategy. So obviously a couple ways we could do it. As I just mentioned, in some areas, it's going to be appropriate just for the city to purchase easements or get dedication of easements. In other circumstances, it may be more appropriate, such as the Quail Court, to purchase that large open space tract if they're open to it. Some of the limitations we're going to have, obviously, if you look at the Willowwood community, if you look at the Quail Court community, as there's undivided interest in these parcels across 50, 60 property owners, getting to 100% unanimous agreement to sell these properties is probably highly unlikely. So one of the things that may come up in a discussion point that the council will have to look at is, are you prepared to do condemnation of that open space or those open spaces to add to our inventory or portions of those just for easement use? So those are some of the big decisions. Obviously, we would prefer to have a deed and dedication, such as happened with Frontier Heights, or an outright purchase of the property, friendly condemnation where the HOA saying Quail Court supports that. But again, because of the difficulty of getting all of the signatures, may have to go through condemnation, or if there's absolute opposition and council finds that it's that important to the build out of the park system, then going through a formal condemnation. So wanted to lay those strategies out. You know, I've heard you on option 2 that you think it provides the most flexibility and support of CT and the economic development. And I also wanted to get your feedback then on where you're at with an acquisition strategy.
I just have to say the word condemnation makes me feel most concerned as whether we're serving the citizens in that case, if they are against this for any reason. I hope we don't get to that point. Fingers crossed.
Mary, I understand where you're coming from with that. And the thought of condemnation always sounds bad to me too. However, the chances of us getting 100% buy-off from the association or a supermajority, just failure of people to respond, absentee ownership, things along those lines, makes it really, really difficult. I don't like it. I'd like the idea of a friendly condemnation, trying to get the majority of the people to sign off it and say, we're all for it. I think that's what I would rather go to. But hopefully we'll see what shakes out on it. I think once we get the concerns of a lot of these people taken care of, I think we'll have an easier time about this too. So.
And it's also hard right now because we can't go talk to them, right?
Right.
We can't have any face-to-face, so that makes it more difficult. Fingers crossed. I hope we find something that is the best for our citizens.
And one of the things we have a problem with on condemnations is that people think that that's just the government taking their land. That's not true. We still have to pay fair market rate for the properties and stuff. So when people come out and say that we're just trying to do land grabs and things like that, they don't understand what condemnation really is. And I always try to point that out to the groups that we've talked to before, because it is not just going in and taking their property without compensation to them. So.
Any other thoughts on the park acquisition, the trail alignment? Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to Marcus. Okay, Kelly, how do I give you back control?
I think you could just stop sharing. Up at the top, yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, so our next would be agenda format for council meetings. A couple of thoughts that I've been chatting with staff about and I wanted to bring forward with the rest of the council is perhaps looking at a different start time, especially with the Zoom. Sometimes 7 o'clock, we seem to keep pushing further and further, past 9 o'clock. So I would like to look at perhaps that. And then we have been having a couple times where we have comments at the front and comments on the end, and we just never know what timeline that gives us or how we get away from going past 9 o'clock all the time. So I was hoping to have a discussion about perhaps moving the meeting up a little bit, since predominantly most people are going to be on Zoom anyways. I don't know how that looks once maybe we get out of post-COVID stuff. Sean, if you could make that happen, it would be because I know you have all the power to help us out here. But I would like to look at, yeah, point at Sean. Come on, Sean. But I'd like to look at maybe a 6:30 start time. So that way we don't always push up against 9:40 at night. I just feel getting past 9 o'clock at night, I would like to see us not be pushing those barriers anymore.
I'll jump in since I was pointed out. I'm actually going to start with the second topic. I get to participate in a lot of city council meetings, and it's my general observation that multiple public comment periods are kind of unusual. I haven't seen multiple public comment periods in most of the meetings that I attend. So I'll just share that.
I think there's also constructive ways for, I like the open comment at the beginning. I just think the comment period at the end gives us not very an idea of our ending time. And I think with everyone be able to jump online, fill information out, and trust me, I think we all get contacted now significantly a lot more through this with people being able to jump on and send emails and so forth. So I would like to see us put that aside, put the comments at the beginning, of course, love to have that. But I would like to have a little bit more, our arms around closing a meeting out on time. Jean, did you have something you wanted to chat about with that too, as far as staff staying on significantly later?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Council President. And obviously from a staff standpoint, we'll yield to the council, but the staff is responsible for attending all these meetings. And so it's just not the council meeting. We attend planning commission, and there's just a lot on our plate with a minimal staff. And so anything we can do to reduce the time is definitely helpful. The start time, moving it up, is definitely beneficial for staff, because we sit around and wait for council to start at 7 o'clock. Many of us now working from home, that's a different case, but during normal times, we continue to work up until 7 o'clock, when we could jump right into a council meeting sooner. So that is our preference as staff. Sooner would be greater.
I remember our conversation at the first retreat around adding the extra comment period, and it was sort of this idea that maybe if we had two different times where people could comment, then those people who couldn't get to the meeting for the first part of the meeting would still have an opportunity to comment towards the end of the meeting. I think now that we have this platform where there's a Zoom platform, and I think we're reaching a lot more people. We certainly have a lot more people attending in this format than we ever did in person. It doesn't seem like there's a significantly larger amount of people towards the end than there are at the beginning. So I don't think that our intended purpose is really relevant right now because we have so many people attending the meeting. So I'm super supportive of going back down to one comment period, and also really like the idea, honestly, of starting a little bit earlier. And so I think those are two really good suggestions.
What would be the thought of pushing it to 6 o'clock as a start time? I think some of the times the reason we started at 7 before is people having traffic, not being able to get there. But I'm assuming with our advances in technology, even if we did go to post-COVID like we used to show up, I don't know, is 6 o'clock a heartache for everyone to get to? We can still, I'm assuming we're still going to be streaming live these meetings and so forth. So people, it's easier for people to get there and see. So thoughts on maybe a 6 o'clock versus 6:30? What is everyone's thoughts?
Well, the only thought that I would have on that is if we're going to only have the one comment period for people to talk to us, which I wholeheartedly agree with, because recently all it is to yell at us for our decisions, that 6:30 might be better, because 6 o'clock, you might be putting it to where people aren't going to be able to get on time, in there on time to do their comments, because you're still taking care of the kids having dinner and that kind of stuff. So that's the only thing I'm thinking of. Yeah, it's not necessarily a traffic problem, although there are still people out there actually working away from home. But if we keep tightening it up to, you know, towards a regular work day, then people are not going to have time to get on and comment.
And
I think that would be bad.
I'm sorry, Councilman Daughtry, I keep interrupting you. I apologize. It does seem like it does seem like there's a benefit to having the comments in the beginning to sort of get a sense, especially if there are comments on actions that we're looking at taking that evening, versus comments at the end after actions have already been taken. Does that seem?
That's exactly what I meant. Yeah.
I think too, the earlier start, the 6 o'clock start would be up to those that have kids to feed in the evening, and they were the ones that are more impacted than I am. So if it's too early, I think then we should push it to 6:30, and 6:30 is fine with me, and one time for people to speak is fine with me as well. So thank you, Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Marcus, I might be the outlier. I would push for earlier than 6 if I had my way. But certainly 6 o'clock is good. And the one comment period, I think Kim nailed it on the head. I appreciate the written format, and I always encourage people, citizens, to send written comment in so that all of us can reflect on it. So anyway, I'd be for a 6 o'clock start time, limiting the comment period to 1, because we noticed that many of the comments 2 meetings ago, I think 3 out of 4 people that commented in the beginning also commented in the second time, the second hour, to share their thoughts on the decisions that were made.
So I understand 6 versus 6:30. Do we want to give 6 o'clock a shot, see if people are frustrated with it, feel like it's too early? Thoughts?
I would start with 6:30.
And Marcus, if you want, we can maybe put out a poll on our Facebook, see what people think about that if you're interested.
I would like to hear what the comments are. Any kind of comment and feedback we can get from our citizens is always important.
I love that idea. Thanks, Troy.
So we can generate a poll and post it out there, get Facebook.
Hey, Marcus.
Thoughts are.
So the goal, if I'm understanding, is not to extend the meeting to 3 hours, but it's to still keep it to try to keep it to the 2 hours, depending on the content, and just be done earlier. Is that for all involved parties, whether it's staff or others.
You know, you're talking to Marcus, right?
The
Marcus,
goal is never to make meetings longer.
I wish I could have recorded the look on your face just now. When
I think it was recorded.
Yeah, it's recorded, and we're going to put that on the website.
4 hours.
So for the record, I
4
have
hours.
6 to 11 then. Is that what the?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now I had 4 to 5 is mine.
Oh,
For me, I encourage you guys, if you have questions that you're not quite sure about, I like meetings as short as possible. I'm never a secret about that. If I have questions that I feel like are above and beyond what's normal as staff, I try to just schedule something to come in and talk with Gene or Eric or call, ask the question. And so that way I'm just a little bit more informed before I go in the meeting. That's why I don't always ask a ton of questions, because I make the phone call earlier, and I'm assuming it's probably easier for me than others as I live, work, and play here. So I just try to reach out to staff and get my arms around it before the meeting. And so that way we can make the meetings as productive as possible.
Hey, Marcus, I just want to echo that. I really appreciate the availability of staff. I reach out to them regularly to get input from them. And so I get most of my questions answered ahead of time as well. So there's less need to ask questions, especially as a presentation. They've already provided the packet. We've already reviewed it. I asked them the questions. I don't need to ask them the same questions at the meeting.
And I think that's true. I've pointed that out before also. But the other thing that our staff does that's real helpful is when we have asked these questions prior to the meeting, that they will actually tell everybody on the council that, hey, a council member asked this question, here's the answer. And that also helps the general public to understand that we are asking these questions and here are the answers, so that they understand what's happening a little bit more too, and hopefully answers their questions. But the staff's done a great job of doing that.
Great job, staff.
Just a reminder, we have a code provision that sets the start time for the regular meeting. So
oh, come on, council, come on.
So we'll have to remember, we'll have to change that before we can have an effective date for that.
That's a good point too. So we probably don't want to do something where we're just going to try it out, because that would require multiple changes.
Great. Well, we'll see what the survey comes back as, and then we'll be able to, I'm going to get on and vote for 6 o'clock like 100 times. Stack the deck there.
Try and make sure they can only vote once. No.
Okay.
And there's going to be a write-in for 4 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
And then I always try to make sure in the meetings, I just try to keep the meeting streamlined, because as we have workshops that talk about it, I try not to, I try not to have it so that way we just ask staff questions off the cuff, because a lot of times they're not prepared to answer those questions. I know a lot of times it's like at the end of the meeting, it's like any other items for the good of the order. When I feel like when we ask staff questions off the cuff, a lot of times they're not prepared to ask, like what's going on with the Trail Master Park. It wasn't part of their presentation. So when we hit them with these off the wall questions, and not that they're, great questions, but I just think a lot of times they don't have the material in front of them to give us the answers we're looking for. And for me, I want to make sure that we keep the staff looking really good in front of the public, as organized and as good as they do a job of. So. That would conclude our agenda. But Eric, sorry, did you have something, Gene?
I was just going to mention the other thing that council may have noticed we've tried to do is reduce the amount that's shared during department reports, because we are reporting on so many different levels nowadays. We've expanded week's wrap up. We've got things on the website. So we've tried to curtail that too. And hopefully that's worked for council. We're only bringing up critical things that we haven't been able to share due to timing.
So, so we'll get back that report. I will put for the next agenda that we have a conversation about it as well. And if we need to change the resolution accordingly, Greg, we'll do that, or the adopting the time and so forth. Yeah.
Council President, you're going to wait on the retreat location discussion.
Nope, you can hit it. We're doing good on time.
Okay.
How long is this, a 10-minute thing?
Yeah, I can just briefly go over it here quickly. And then I know Brett will want to to weigh in, of course. If I could just share my screen here really quick. So I don't have all of the information, and this is certainly just a sampling of a couple of venue ideas. So when I got here, I understand that you've had a retreat before at Samiamu, and that maybe that wasn't the preferred location going forward. So I'm trying to research a couple of other options, and we can look at even further options. But I'm just trying to put this together here. I know there's talk about the Suncadia Resort, and we have gotten a proposal from them. And so I just wanted to kind of put that down as option one, and how far away that is, and what some of the estimated costs would be. Backing up, the governor has released some new regulations regarding business meetings. So we can have business meetings and conferences at 30% capacity to the meeting room, as long as you're 6 feet away, and there's some regulations about the food handling and that kind of thing. But it does look like the way it stands right now, we could meet in a lot of these rooms, like for La Conner, for instance, that room's a little bit smaller, so that they would allow up to 30 people. So for their 30% capacity, so we could make that. Anyway, so these were just a couple of ideas. I'm trading calls with Skamania Lodge. I just wanted to get some pricing from them. They are quite a bit further away, 240 miles each way. Beautiful facility, but maybe that's too far. Again, you'll see Suncadia Resort, because I know that was suggested, is pretty typical, about $140 a night for their hotel. Meals range from $18 to $33. And then I also throw in La Conner Country Inn. I understand from Jean, you guys have met there before. I know in my prior city, this Two Forks room at the Country Inn, this is the sister hotel, not the one on the water. This is the Country Inn that's kind of more in the downtown area, has worked pretty well, and they're pretty reasonable. So again, estimated nights for hotel is $140. Meals range from $12 to $20, plus gratuity. So this is just a sampling of a couple places. I can go out and look at more. I know, again, I just don't have the background as to what you guys have done before and what has worked well or what you want to change. And I'm also looking at tentative dates right now. I just understand you typically have it at the end of January. So if this is Friday, January 29th, 21, and Saturday, January 30th, 21. And each of these 3 hotels are available for those days.
If I had a vote, I would say probably Suncadia. I do like the idea of getting a little bit out of our area and going looking at different type of amenities. La Conner, we've gone there several times. I'm not a huge fan of, I think there's only one place really to eat, like the Thistle or something like that. I would prefer that we, if people feel like driving, I guess that is. I mean, I would choose Suncadia.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like it's about 110 miles each way. It does look beautiful. I just threw on a couple of pictures of a couple of their meeting rooms. Looks very nice.
Am I remembering correctly that we had the retreat in February? Not in January. Oops. I thought it was in February.
I'll have to look back.
It was at end of January.
Okay.
Well, one was
Kathy
okay,
had left me these 2 dates as the tentative dates. So I wasn't sure if that was already discussed or.
All right.
We can look at other dates too. But
Yeah,
it'd be
our
nice
law
to.
firm has had a number of retreats at Suncadia, and it's a pretty good facility.
Yeah, we are approaching October, and setting these dates now would be great, and just getting a contract signed with the hotel so that we've got a space and start figuring out all the details would be great.
The further away we are, the more likely folks would have to stay an extra night, either going up the day before and staying the night or staying after, just because of the long drive time. So I'm more in favor of Suncadia or La Conner over the Skamania option, just because of the.
Okay.
Has any thought been given to the new facility in Lake Stevens? No, never mind.
I would vote.
Got a great facility called the Mill, and there's a Subway right across the parking lot.
Fine dining, Kim.
And buzzing, and buzzing.
Yeah. I would, as Gary speaking, I would not be in favor of driving 242 miles to go to a conference. So either Suncadia or LaConner, or even something closer. We all have busy lives, and I would hope that we could find something a little closer. But that being said, I would also request that it not be at the end of the month. Some of us have some professional obligations that we wind up our month ends right at that time, and it becomes a very busy time. So hopefully we could do maybe a second or third week of the month.
Gary, you and I can get together and try to put some dates together.
Yeah, that'd be great. Sure.
I don't want to back up against the Super Bowl being the first week of February.
Is that what it is?
Usually, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
another option that's a little more local that I know has some nice conference rooms is the Hotel Indigo in Everett on the waterfront. Yeah. So that might be worth looking into. And then we're not incurring overnight costs.
Good point, Angie.
Yeah, and a couple of people have told me about the Inn at Port Gardner down on the marina. I don't know. I check that out as well.
I don't know if they have conference.
They're pretty small. I've been to a conference there before, and the rooms are on the small side. Yeah, but Hotel Indigo rooms are comparable to the others that you have listed here.
What about the country club, Marcus?
Country club is definitely, I could get us into the country club.
It's also Tulalip.
Yeah. So if we want to look at the country club, I can get a contact for us there, and they have great meeting rooms and breakfast, lunch, and dinner as well. So
just a thought. Yep.
Kelly, if you want to get with me, I can get you a contact for there.
Okay. So should I further get some more exact pricing on Suncadia and bring it back with more of with more local options with Everett, and then we can take a look at it again? Should we scratch Suncadia and just look for local at this point?
I think let's just put everything on the table, and then we can get together and make a decision. Yeah.
Okay. We'll do that.
And I'll just comment. I've had experience over the years doing several different options. And my experience of going too local hasn't worked out because people find that it's too easy to book other events, soccer games and this and that, and they don't dedicate the time to the actual event. And so I just want to caution council, if everybody could dedicate the time, great. But if not, I've seen it erode the meetings where people aren't able to attend because they did book a soccer game or a play they need to go to for a family event. If it's a little further away and a little more of an effort, people tend to attend the whole thing.
Thanks, Gene. That's really good information.
Yeah, because, sometimes when we've had our things, something like a little problem, COVID comes up and we have to lose one of our council members or whatever, just so, yeah, I can see it. Sorry, Sean.
For the record, I love to drive and I have no preference on the location. We can do it in the farthest corners of the state as far as I'm.
So how about Walla Walla?
I just want to see the sun.
There's no golf at Suncadia that time of year. It's all snow, so doesn't matter to me that way either. So we're right up on 1 o'clock. I think we're at a good stopping point. Any last thoughts that we want to have out there before we call it a workshop over with?
I just want to thank staff for putting this all together. They did a great job as usual, but thank you again.
Agreed.
Ditto that.
Yeah, great information.
Thank you so much. Hard work. Well done.
Gene and staff and Kelly, thank you so much. And great little mini retreat here. And I look forward to getting something planned for January. And hopefully Sean will stop this whole COVID epidemic soon so that way we can get back face to face.
No pressure, Sean.
Great. If there's not anything else, Gene, any last parting shots for you?
Thank you, everyone, for dedicating time. Have a good weekend. Be safe, and we'll see you next week.
All right.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, you guys.